Chapter 2848. They belonged to the type of drama where the falling flowers had feelings for the heartless brook. But now, Rongyue Tianlan's gaze swept over Xie Fenglu again, his eyes faintly cold. After all, he was an exalted immortal who had cultivated for thousands of years. Once he released the pressure of an exalted immortal, he could still completely suppress Xie Fenglu, who had just cultivated to the supreme god level. Xie Fenglu didn't want to be afraid of him, but under the pressure of the other party, his legs couldn't help but go soft, and he almost knelt down. His eyes flashed, his body swayed, and he suddenly fell towards Shen Jiyue. Shen Jiyue subconsciously supported him. Xie Fenglu's body went soft, and he took advantage of the situation to fall into her arms. The two of them were originally singing an opera. They were wearing costumes and had makeup on their faces. At this moment, Xie Fenglu, who was playing the role of the Jade Maiden, fell into the arms of Ji Xinyue, who was playing the role of the Golden Boy, which immediately caused the audience below to cheer. However, just as the cheers rushed out of their throats, another shocking change occurred on the stage. Just as the Jade Maiden fell into the Golden Boy's arms, the Golden Boy suddenly stepped back. The Jade Maiden was caught off guard and fell onto the stage with a plop. This fall wasn't light for the Jade Maiden. She fell there and curled up, and couldn't help but cry out in pain. This cry of pain was a standard male voice. It was abnormally abrupt in the stunned silence of the audience. Everyone heard it. Why was the Jade Maiden's voice a man's? Could it be that the Jade Maiden wasn't played by Ji Xinyue, the only female disciple? Everyone stared at the stage with wide eyes, and then they saw a godly turn of events. The makeup on the Jade Maiden's face on the stage seemed to be washed away by a pair of invisible hands. A moment later, her true appearance was finally revealed. It was a delicate face. Although the eyes were watery and there were dimples on both cheeks, it was a man's face. He's not Princess Xinyu. Some people who had seen Ji Xinyue's true appearance in Misty Mountain cried out. He's the last disciple of the Purple Cloud sect master, Xie Fenglu, young master Xie. So it's not Princess Xinyu. I was wondering why her style of singing was so bold. This is what it means to entertain one's relatives. The Purple Cloud sect's disciples are really too good to their master. Like I said, no matter how much Princess Xinyu wants to make master happy, she can't throw away her face like that and do such a bold action. Everyone started to discuss spiritedly, as if they understood what was going on. Originally, they were secretly cursing Ji Xinyue in their hearts, but now, all of that naturally disappeared. Ji Xinyue's reputation was like a person who had just walked through the gates of hell and was silently washed clean. Xie Fenglu, on the other hand, was praised by everyone. His plan had failed. He was stunned for a moment before regaining his composure. At this point, he could no longer continue his act. Xie Fenglu took the opportunity to say a few words of congratulations to his master, and then left with Ji Xinyu. Sect Master Zi Yun glanced at Rongyue Ishinlin with a complicated look in his eyes. He originally wanted to embarrass this guy and avenge his precious disciple, but he didn't expect this guy to have the ability to easily resolve the awkwardness. At this moment, he swaggered to the seat of honor not far away from him, looking like he was going to calmly watch the show. Although the other guests present had just seen a good show of a man playing a woman, they still didn't see Ji Xinyu. They couldn't help but feel regretful. Someone asked Ji Xinyu, as the only female disciple of Sect Master Ziyin, what surprise would she bring to their master? Chapter 2849. The purpose of these words was none other than to see Ji Xinyu, even if she came out to say a few words of congratulations. Sect Master Ziyun's expression did not change. Before he could speak, Rongyue Ishinlin had already opened her mouth while waving her fan. Princess Xinyu has already prepared a birthday present for her master, and she has already presented it to him. The blue pearl on Sect Master Ziyun's feathered crown was given by her. The pearl is for the Pearl King, and this pearl is worth hundreds of years of Sect Master Ziyun's birthday present. Sect Master Ziyun, don't you agree? Sect Master Ziyun. Most of the onlookers knew how difficult it was to obtain this pearl of fate. Gasps could be heard everywhere. Although it was a pity that they could not see Ji Xinyu's true face, they still felt that Rongyue Shenlin's words were reasonable. Sect Master Ziyan glanced at Rongyue Shenlin and said with a faint smile, Rong Yuejun really cares for my disciple. As expected, you have the bearing of an exalted immortal. Perhaps it would be better if Xinyu thanked you in person. He clapped his hands twice. Xinyu, come out when you're done. Ji Xinyu had originally wanted to go out alone to celebrate her master's birthday. Hearing her master's call, she walked out. At this moment, she had already changed into a normal purple cloud sect disciple's attire. She wore a light purple dress with rolling clouds, and her long black hair was casually tied up with a hairband. In the middle of the headband, a purple pearl was embedded in her forehead, making her eyes shine like stars. It was clearly a very ordinary attire, but on her, it was extremely outstanding. People could hardly take their eyes off of her. Those who had already seen her true face secretly heaved a sigh of relief, their gazes faintly burning as they looked at her. Those who had never seen her before also widened their eyes at this moment. They had a sense of recognition that the rumors were indeed true. She really was a peerless beauty. They felt that this trip was indeed worth it. Those young talents who had not yet married looked at Ji Xinyu with even more burning eyes, and were already planning how to win the heart of this beauty. Xinyu, this exalted immortal Rongyu, is Master's good friend. Originally, he was unable to raise his head in front of Master because of the wrong marriage with you. Fortunately, your marriage has been annulled, and he is now your elder. You two can get to know each other again, Sect Master Ziyan said. Ji Xinyu was slightly startled, but as expected she stepped forward and bowed. Senior Rongyu, greetings. Rongyue Shenlin's lips twitched. Before he had the chance to say anything, the Purple Cloud Sect's sect master once again spoke up kindly. Xinyu, don't call him senior. It makes him sound old and distant. It's better to call him uncle. Ji Xinyu readily accepted his advice, and was about to address him as uncle when Rongyue Tianlan decisively said, just address him as you did before. Don't change it. He did not want to be Ji Xinyu's elder. He had never thought about it. He also didn't have Shen Juli's heavy taste, who liked to flirt with the younger generation disciples. When he thought of this, he himself froze. When he saw Ji Xinyu talking about love, this was actually what appeared in his mind. He had long known that he liked Ji Xinyu, but knowing that he had wronged another woman in his previous life, and still having such thoughts subconsciously, it was worth pondering over. Rongyue Shenlin admitted that she was a benevolent and magnanimous immortal. As an immortal, what they were most afraid of was owing someone a favor and not being able to return it, especially this kind of emotional debt. Chapter 2850. He had originally planned to bring Ji Tianyue back to the Tianxi continent and raise her by his side, just like how the great god raised Ning Xuema. He thought that since he could fall in love with her in his previous life, he would definitely fall in love with her now. All he lacked was time. Perhaps after a few years, he would be able to develop feelings for her. By then, it would not be too late to talk about marriage. But now, his heart was deviating more and more, and it was getting harder and harder to control himself. Seeing Ji Xinyue in front of him being so courteous to him, as if he was an elder, he felt extremely uncomfortable. But he could not say anything at the moment. After all, he and Sect Master Ziyin were of the same generation. Sect Master Ziyin raised his teacup and took a sip, then said indifferently, previously, you were engaged, so naturally, you should treat each other as equals. But now, you are no longer related to each other. You and I are friends, and you are old enough to be her uncle. Xinyu should call you uncle. This seniority cannot be messed up. Xinyu, offer this Uncle Rongyu some tea. Ji Xinyu agreed, then poured a cup of tea and handed it to Rongyu Tianlan with both hands. Uncle Rongyu, please have some tea. Rongyu Tianlan. He secretly gritted his teeth and looked at Sect Master Ziyin with a smile that was not a smile. Old friends, old friends. A friend's disciple may not be my own junior. Moreover, we are friends despite our age difference. Our seniority does not involve our disciples. I have always treated your disciple as equals, and we are also friends. There is no distinction between senior and junior. Just call her how you used to call her, and get used to it. We immortals do not care about such formalities. Ji Xinyue saw that he was entangled with seniority, and was momentarily stunned. She did not know why he was so concerned about this. Then she suddenly thought of Ji Tianyue, and immediately understood. Rongyu Tianlan was going to marry his sister. Because of Ji Tianyue, he could not be his future wife's uncle. Ji Xinyue finally figured out what he was worried about. She didn't want to become an obstacle for others, so she smiled faintly. If we're of the same generation, then so be it. Perhaps Rong Yuejun has his own difficulties, and needs Shenyu to be of the same generation as him. Rongyu Tianlan was stunned. He looked at Ji Shenyue with a deep gaze. He bet that there was a distance between the difficulties Ji Shenyue spoke of, and the difficulties in his heart. Furthermore, the distance between them wasn't small, but it didn't seem easy to explain. He didn't say anything for a while, so Ji Shenyue took it as his silence. He took a few steps back, and put some distance between them before bowing to his master. Master, this disciple is willing to perform a sword dance to congratulate Master on your birthday. Please take it as a small gift that disciple has prepared for Master. Naturally, Sect Master Ziyin would agree to this request. After nodding his head, he propped his chin up and waited in high spirits. He didn't forget to explain to Rong Yuishenlin. This seat's female disciple is actually very good at dancing. It's just that she doesn't usually like to dance. Even I can't force her to dance. It's rare that she's interested in dancing today. He excitedly ordered Xie Fenglu, who had already changed back into his normal disciple uniform. Ninth brother, play for your senior sister. How could Xie Fenglu be unwilling? He immediately agreed, and took out a zither from his storage space. There was even a zither table and a zither stool. He sat there and looked at his senior sister with bright eyes. Senior sister, what sword dance do you want to perform? Harmony between the zither and the zither? A phoenix seeking a phoenix? Or a perfect pair? Chapter 2851. Ji Xinyue's sword was already in her hand. She had the urge to cut this little rascal. What nonsense was this? She only liked to dance one dance in public, return triumphant. When had she danced the others? This little rascal was obviously looking for a beating by singing so many sour songs. Return triumphant. She spat out these 3 words. She still left some face for her junior brother in front of others. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. Xie Fenglu tactfully responded, not daring to pluck the fur from the tiger's mouth. Rong Yuetian watched the interaction between the two of them, waving his fan without any reaction. He had never heard of this song before, so even if he volunteered to accompany her, he did not have the capital to do so. But Ji Shenyue's dance. He had seen it once, when she was drunk, dancing alone under the moonlight. Although her steps were staggering, it was still very interesting. Now that she was sober, what would it be like to dance? Ji Yu's solo dance suddenly appeared in his mind. Her sleeves fluttered in the wind, as intoxicating as a beautiful flower. After a burst of intense music, Ji Xinyue had already flown to the center of the stage. Kicks, bends, splits, twirls, the sword flashed like flying frost, the figure spun like falling snow. Her dance had the gentleness of an ordinary dancer, but also the freedom and casualness of a swordsman. Rong Yuetian looked at the graceful figure on the stage, and could not help but think of Ning Xiuma's poem that described sword dance. Horui shot the 9 sunsets, like a group of emperors flying in the sky. It came like thunder, it stopped in anger, it stopped like the clear light of the blue sea. Rather than calling it a dance, it would be better to call it a swordsmanship. The combination of swordsmanship and dance was flawless. The surrounding people were all mesmerized and amazed by her movements and stillness. They were reluctant to even blink their eyes. Rong Yuetian was very accomplished in singing and dancing. He had seen countless songs and dances in his life, but this was the first time he was so engrossed in a girl's solo dance. The fan in his hand could not help but beat to the beat. It was his first time seeing this dance, but he felt that it was inexplicably familiar. It was as if he had seen some of her movements a long time ago. He thought of Ji Yu again. Ji Yu's dance was completely different from her dance style, but the flexibility of her body, the degree of bending, and even the movement of her fingers. There were similarities between the two, especially the orchid finger formed by the left hand, which was different from the orchid finger formed by ordinary dancers. It was unique. Ji-yu and Ji Xinyu's orchid fingers were shockingly similar. Rongyue Tianlan stared at her delicate little finger, and her heart seemed to be in turmoil. If Ji-yu was only the reincarnation of Ji Xinyu's soul, then even if they had no memories of each other, their deep-rooted habits would still exist. For example, the current dance was clearly two different styles, but they had some small overlapping habits. Could it be that Xinyu was Ji-yu? Did he get the wrong person? But if Ji-yu was the reincarnation of Ji Xinyu's soul, why didn't she have any resemblance to Ji Xinyu in terms of appearance and personality? Why was she exactly the same as Tianyu? This didn't seem to make sense. Could it be that Ji Xinyu was also envious of Ji Tianyu? Envy that she can easily obtain the love of her parents. Envy that she can grow up innocently and carefreely. Because of envy, it formed an inner demon, and when one of her souls escaped, she was reincarnated as the little princess Ji-yu. Because she was so envious, this reincarnated Ji-yu not only looked exactly like Ji Tianyu, but also imitated her personality. Chapter 2852. Was that so? Was that so? Rongyue Ishinlan's fingers turned white as he held the fan. If Ji Xinyue was really Ji-yu, then his previous rejection of the marriage, was he not asking for trouble? However, as long as Ji Xinyue was Ji-yu, even if he was asking for trouble, he would accept it. He would rather she had been Ji-yu. He would rather work 10,000 times harder to remarry her. It was better than them not being the same person. Could they be the same person? Rongyue Ishinlan pondered as he watched the song and dance. If she became a demon in her heart because of envy, causing a part of her soul to escape and reincarnate, then the soul that escaped must be her heart's soul. The heart's soul was responsible for envy, jealousy, and other emotions. The appearance of the heart's soul could indeed be different from the main soul. If it had been reincarnated, then this heart soul would retain the appearance of its previous life. In other words, if he guessed correctly, her current heart soul would be like Ji-yu's. He only needed to find an opportunity to take out her heart soul to take a look, and he would know. He looked at Ji Xinyue, who was dancing gracefully, and his heart was burning. He felt that he could not wait any longer. He twisted his fingertips, and the jade flute appeared in his palm. Sect Master Ziyun glanced at him and transmitted his voice. What is Rongyue Jun doing? Good dance, good music, I will accompany her. Do you know this song? After listening to it once I know it. Rongyue Ishinlan answered simply. He had already heard Xie Fenglu play it once, and it was enough for him to remember the tune. The flute sounded leisurely and tactfully joined in. The flute was low and melodious, but the guqin was sonorous and powerful. Logically speaking, the guqin could only suppress the flute, but the flute could never suppress the guqin. However, after a while, the guqin could no longer be heard in the audience, only the flute's sound lingering in the field. The flute's sound naturally replaced the guqin's. They were obviously two very different instruments, but the switch did not feel abrupt at all. It was as if the song should have been played by the flute in the first place. The sound of the zither just now was actually very good, but compared to the sound of the flute, it was like the difference between the sound of nature and ordinary music. The latter could be completely ignored. Xie Fengliu's baby face was slightly red. He tried his best to take back the initiative, but even though he had played with all his might, the sound of the zither was still drowned out by the sound of the flute. He was so close to the zither, but he could not hear his own music clearly. Now it was no longer a competition of musical instruments, but a secret battle of psychokinesis. It was obvious that Xie Fenglu had been completely defeated. In his anger, Xie Fenglu played a few wrong notes in succession. Fortunately, the sound of the zither was suppressed by the sound of the flute. Even if he made a mistake, he wouldn't be able to tell. Because the transition between the two instruments was too natural, Ji Xinyu, who was dancing to the music, did not notice it at all. She only felt that the music made her movements smoother and more natural. Even her heart was swaying along with the music. Unknowingly, she was completely immersed in the dance. It was as if she had put on a pair of red dancing shoes. She could no longer stop, nor did she want to stop. Other than the melodious sound of the flute, the hall was completely silent. Everyone held their breaths, not even daring to breathe too loudly. They were all intoxicated, completely immersed in the flute's dance, and could not bear to wake up. Rong Yuishinlin had already stood up at some point, and while playing the flute, he walked around Ji Xinyu. His feet naturally followed the beat, and his clothes fluttered. His body movements were in sync with Ji Xinyu's. He was not dancing, but he was more harmonious than any other man dancing with her. Chapter 2853. Ji Xinyue was completely immersed. At this time, she forgot the knot in her heart that she had for Rong Yuishinlin, forgot that she had secretly vowed to stay away from him, and also forgot the honor and humiliation that this person had brought to her. She naturally jumped along with his steps, the sword light flashing, but not a single sword light touched the corner of Rong Yuishinlin's clothes. As the two figures staggered, Rong Yuishinlin's fingers stroked her hair. This stroke was also a light one, as light as a feather. Not only did others not notice it, even Ji Xinyu herself did not notice it. She only felt her heart inexplicably jump, and there was a short buzzing sound in her head. He was too close to her, so close that she could smell the faint plum fragrance on his body. Rong Yuishinlin's body turned and suddenly retreated. The sound of the flute in his mouth missed a beat, and Ji Xinyu seemed to have finally reacted, and he could not help but stop in his steps. The sword in his hand was originally slanted to the left, but because of the wrong step, the sword stabbed straight towards Rong Yuishinlin in front of him. Rong Yuishinlin's reaction was a little slow at this time. He could have easily dodged it, but he actually reacted before he remembered to dodge. After all, he was a little late, and it was too late for him to dodge. He could only use his fingers to pinch it. He pinched the bright blade of the sword. Ji Xinyue's sword was bestowed by the Purple Cloud Sect Master. It was a divine sword, and it was said that it was made from the bones of some strange beast. It contained the evil spirit of this strange beast, and not only could it cut through hairs, but it could also break all protective enchantments. Therefore, although Rong Yuishinlin pinched the blade of the sword, the blade also cut his fingers. Fresh blood dripped down, dyeing the bright blade of the sword red. Ji Xinyue's expression changed slightly, and his wrist paused, not daring to move at all. He looked at Rong Yuishinlin's pale face. You. Perhaps it was because of the injury, Rong Yuishinlin's face was extremely pale. He took a step back, and quickly wrapped the sword wound in his palm. He took another step back, and tripped on something, and his body staggered, almost falling. Ji Xinyue felt guilty, and quickly reached out to support him. I'm sorry, are you okay? Rong Yuishinlin took another step back, and forced a smile. I'm fine, it's my fault, you don't have to take it to heart. Indeed, he could only blame himself. He had practically bumped into the tip of the sword himself. Brother Rongyu! An exclamation came from the direction of the door. A small figure rushed in and grabbed Rongyu Tianlan's sleeve. Her pretty face was full of heartache. You're injured. She then raised her eyes to look at her elder sister, and without thinking she blurted out. Third elder sister, why are you so careless? The one who ran in was Ji Tianyue. Ji Xinyu looked at her sister who had suddenly barged in and frowned slightly. Today was the Purple Cloud Sect leader's birthday. In order to welcome the guests, the gates of the Purple Cloud Sect were open to the public. Therefore, as long as everyone had an invitation, they could enter and leave at will. As for Ji Tianyue, she probably didn't have an invitation, but a few years ago, she had followed her sister to the Purple Cloud Sect out of curiosity. The little girl was lively and active. She had only stayed in the Purple Cloud Sect for 5 or 6 days, but she had already gotten along well with everyone in the Purple Cloud Sect. During those days, she often went in and out of the Purple Cloud Sect. The disciples guarding the gate already knew her, and were very familiar with her. The gatekeeping disciple didn't know that Ji Xinyu and her sister already had a grudge against each other, and even treated her as a respected guest. Chapter 2854. Therefore, after she arrived, She told the disciples guarding the door that she wanted to give her sister a surprise, and the disciples let her in. Along the way, for the same reason, she openly barged in and directly barged into the hall. She happened to see Ji Shunyue dancing, and Rongyue Tianlan being the accompaniment, and even getting injured. She pulled Rongyue Tianlan's sleeve, and wanted to see his injury. She couldn't help but grab his hand. Rongyue Tianlan probably didn't expect her to appear at this time. In addition, his reaction had been half a beat slower, so he only reacted after his hand was grabbed by Ji Tianyue. He frowned slightly, and instinctively waved his hand. Ji Tianyue didn't have much kung fu on her, so she was thrown out by his wave. Bam! She fell off the stage and directly hit a table. The dishes and wine on the table were all served and filled to the brim. After being smashed by her, the plates and cups all flew up and clattered. Some of them fell to the ground, and some of them clattered onto her body. Fortunately, Rongyue Tianlan just waved his hand subconsciously and didn't use any telekinesis. Although she fell in a sorry state, she didn't suffer any injuries. The little girl jumped down from the table with her head and body covered in soup. Her pair of big eyes looked at Rongyue Tianlan, who had just reacted on the stage. She pursed her lips and burst into tears. Rongyue Tianlan's action just now was an instinctive reaction without thinking. At this moment, seeing Ji Tianyue fall in such a sorry state, he was also stunned. He jumped up and landed beside Ji Tianyue. He endured the pain in his fingers and cast a cleaning spell on her body, wanting to tidy up the little girl again. But after all, he had just used a spell and was injured. Coupled with his unstable state of mind, the cleansing spell was a little messy. He only managed to clean some of the soup and water off her body. The stains were still on her body, and even her hair was still dripping with vegetable soup. Ji Tianyue looked at him anxiously. Brother Rongyue. She wanted to grab Rongyue Tianlan's sleeve again. However, she had just suffered a loss, and was still a little scared. She only tried to pull it. Rongyue Tianlan stepped back, and Ji Tianyue grabbed nothing. She was stunned for a moment, and the tears that she had just stopped came out again. The veins on Rongyue Tianlan's forehead popped a few times. He secretly took a deep breath, and finally calmed down. Tianyu, why are you here? Looking at the vegetable soup dripping from her head, he couldn't bear it, and was about to cast a second cleansing spell. Casting the cleansing technique required him to form a series of hand seals. His palm was injured, so he couldn't help but touch the wound. He frowned again. Let me do it. Ji Shunyue finally couldn't stand it anymore. Her sister had made such a big fool of herself, and she also lost face. She made a series of hand seals and cast a spell. After a faint flash of light, Ji Tianyue's body finally felt refreshed. Ji Tianyue brushed her hair and shook her skirt to make sure that there was nothing wrong. Only then did the tears on her pretty face stop. She softly said the reason for her visit. It's elder sister's master's birthday. Imperial father asked Tianyue to come and celebrate the birthday of elder sister's master. Tianyue has been rushing for the past few days, but I didn't expect that I would still be late. Her reason was quite reasonable. Ji Shunyue frowned slightly, but didn't say anything else. She glanced at Rongyue Tianlan's hand. Rongyue Tianlan's finger injury was not light, and because it was caused by the divine sword. Chapter 2855. Rongyue Tianlan's finger injury was not light, and because it was caused by the divine sword, it was not easy for the wound to heal immediately. At this moment, blood had dyed the bandage on her hand. She paused, thinking that her medical skills were average, and Rongyue Tianlan was a divine doctor himself. Such a small injury should be nothing to him, and he did not need her concern. Therefore, she only nodded slightly at Rongyue Tianlan. When she turned her head, she saw Xie Fenglu bleeding from the corner of his mouth. She was shocked and walked over quickly. Old Nine, are you injured? Xie Fenglu was injured because his zither could not withstand Rongyue Tianlan's flute music. He refused to admit defeat, and insisted on resisting. In the end, he was hit by the zither music, and suffered internal injuries. Blood had been flowing from the corner of his mouth for a while, but because too many things had happened, everyone's attention was on Ji Shunyue, Rongyue Tianlan, and Ji Tianyue, who came on later. So no one noticed him. Ji Xinyue was the first to notice that something was wrong with him. Xie Fengliu's baby face was already a little pale, and when he got up he staggered. Ji Xinyue hurriedly helped him up. "What's wrong? You can get injured from playing the zither?" She was too engrossed in dancing, and did not notice the secret battle between Rongyue Tianlan and Xie Fengliu. After she helped him up, she was about to let go of him, when Xie Fengliu's body tilted and fell towards her again. Ji Xinyue could only support him again. "What's wrong with you?" Xie Fengliu leaned on her body, panting slightly. "I'm a little dizzy." Ji Xinyue casually took his pulse, and found that his pulse was light and floating, and it was beating much faster than usual. It was indeed a symptom of internal injury. "How did you get injured?" Ji Xinyue asked as she helped him off the stage. Xie Fengliu looked at her sadly, then looked at Rongyue Tianlan, who was still standing on the stage. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, and he leaned closer to Ji Xinyue. He did not want to say that he was defeated by Rongyue Tianlan. He only answered vaguely. "Playing the zither consumes a little more telekinesis. It's okay, I'll be fine after some rest." Sect Master Ziyin, who had been watching everything from the sidelines, rested her chin on her hand, and looked at Ji Tianyue. "It's rare for your imperial father to be so considerate. I wonder what gift he has brought for me." Ji Tianyue was circling around Rongyue Tian. She had to answer Sect Master Ziyin's question. She could only bow and present the gift that the South Heaven Emperor had asked her to bring, a fist-sized luminous pearl. The luminous pearl was a rare item, but it could be found everywhere in the Purple Cloud sect. The Purple Cloud sect master glanced at it, and gestured for Feng Wuji to take it. He then said, "This luminous pearl is not bad. Put it in the stable to light up the horses." Feng Wuji nodded and left with the luminous pearl. No matter how naive Ji Tianyue was, she knew that the night luminescent pearl that her imperial father fished out of the House of Treasures on a whim was not well received. She grumbled in her heart that her imperial father chose such an unpresentable gift while glancing at her elder sister. Ji Xinyue was busy treating Xie Fengliu's injuries and did not pay attention to her. She pursed her lips and smiled sweetly at Sect Master Ziyin. Tianyue is willing to dance for Sect Master as a birthday gift. Sect Master Ziyin did not object. "It's rare for you to be so considerate. Dance then." Ji Tianyue pursed her lips again. "I wonder if Tianyue can ask the senior brothers of the Purple Cloud sect to accompany me?" Chapter 2856. Sect Master Ziyin did not object, so he let the music disciples prepare, and let Ji Tianyue say the name of the song. But after Ji Tianyue said the name, no one knew the song. Ji Tianyue looked at Rongyue Tianlan eagerly. "Brother Rongyue, you're probably the only one who knows this song. But your hand is injured, so playing the jade flute will be a hindrance. Why don't you say the song and let the musicians here play it?" Not everyone in this world was as smart as Rongyue Tianlan, who could play any song immediately after hearing it once. Even if Rongyue Tianlan wrote out the score directly, those people would have to practice it a few times. Rongyue Tianlan casually glanced at Ji Xinyu, who was beside Xie Fengliu, asking about his well-being. He took out the jade flute and said indifferently, "No need for them, I'll accompany you." Ji Tianyue's eyes lit up, and her little face was full of joy. "That's great. Thank you, Brother Rongyue. But your injury? It's just a small injury, it's not a problem." Rongyue Tianlan had already calmed down. He glanced at Ji Xinyu, who was focused on Xie Fengliu at the moment. She was using telekinesis to heal him, so she did not look at him at all. Rongyue Tianlan's lips twitched slightly, as if he was smiling, but he did not know if he was smiling at himself or at someone else. He had already sensed that the injury on his hand had damaged his tendons and veins, and even some of the bones in his palm had been cut. At the moment, the pain was unbearable. The sword belonged to Ji Xinyu, so she should know the consequences of injuring someone with this sword. But she chose to ignore it and care about Xie Fengliu, who was far less injured than him. It was as if she did not see that his palms were bleeding non-stop. Even though the blood had already stained the gauze, Rongyue Tianlan lowered his eyes slightly. He quickly treated the injury on his hand, applied the corresponding ointment, and hit his own acupuncture points. Finally, he succeeded in stopping the bleeding, and then wrapped it up again with bandages. He played the jade flute again. This time, it was just a normal play, and he did not use any telekinesis. Ji Tianyue danced to the sound of the flute, and the song she danced was the same one she had danced in front of Jun Liuye that year. Her figure was graceful and beautiful. Everyone present was an expert in this field, so they could naturally see the pros and cons seeing that Ji Tianyue could perform such a standard dance at such a young age. Everyone gave her a warm round of applause. Ji Xinyu's dance was a combination of hardness and gentleness. It had the strength of ice and snow, but also the gentleness of a willow. When the two were combined, it gave off a shocking effect. On the other hand, Ji Tianyue's dance was graceful and feminine. Her waist was like a willow, and her arms were like soft silk. She had the soul of a superb dancer. The dance of the two sisters could be said to have their own characteristics, and there was no distinction between them. This was Ji Tianyue's best dance. Every time she danced, she would receive thunderous applause, and this time was no exception. It wasn't until the thunderous applause rang out that Ji Xinyue noticed the commotion over here. She just happened to see her sister's fluttering skirt fall to the ground, and Rongyue Tianlan had just finished playing the last note. She had just put down the jade flute in her hand. Ji Tianyue was in high spirits as she slightly bowed towards the crowd. Her etiquette was thorough and her smile was as sweet as honey, and Rongyue Tianlan's gaze was also looking at her, the corners of his mouth hooked up in his usual smile. Ji Xinyue also smiled. Her little sister was indeed talented in dancing, and it was common for her to win applause. She was also the pride of her imperial father. Every time there was a state banquet or a major festival, the South Heaven Emperor would always let her little sister dance. Chapter 2857. A few years ago, before her cultivation went berserk, she had envied this and secretly practiced this dance. Now that she thought about it, it was just a joke. Why did she have to learn from others? Everyone had their own strengths and weaknesses, and they were good at different things. Why did she have to follow others' footsteps? Because she had thought about this, Ji Xinyue suppressed this dance to the bottom of a box in her mind. She felt embarrassed dancing it herself, let alone performing it in front of others. Therefore, no one in this world knew that she could dance this dance, and she was not prepared to let anyone know. Ji Tianyu's dance won countless praises. Words like this dance could only be found in heaven, and how many times could it be seen in the human world? And so on were not plentiful. Ji Tianyu was praised until she was floating in the air, and regained the feeling of being the center of attention. There were also people who were unconvinced. I think Princess Xinyu's sword dance was better and more imposing. There were also people who retorted, of course the sword dance is better, but the word dance is about gentleness and beauty. The sword dance is slightly lacking in this aspect. I don't think it's lacking. Princess Tianyu's dance can actually be performed by dancers. But Princess Xinyu's dance is unique. No one can compare. There were also people who agreed. That's true. I believe Princess Xinyu can also perform this dance. But Princess Xinyu definitely can't perform Princess Xinyu's sword dance. Naturally, Ji Tianyue heard the discussion below. She couldn't hold back her anger and retorted, no one can dance this dance of mine. There are so many dancers in the palace who want to learn this dance, but none of them can. Xie Fenglu had already returned to normal under Ji Xinyu's treatment. At this moment he could not help but chuckle. That's because those dancers are too stupid. If it was my senior sister, she could learn this dance immediately. Maybe she already knew it, but was too lazy to perform such a childish dance. Ji Tianyu was anxious. No. Her eyes turned to Ji Xinyu. Third sister, do you know this dance? Thus, everyone's eyes focused on Ji Xinyu. Even Rongyu Ishinlin's gaze turned over, as if waiting for her to explain. Ji Xinyu frowned slightly. This kind of argument was simply too childish. She said bluntly, I won't. Everyone. Rongyu Ishinlin's eyes dimmed slightly. Ji Tianyue, on the other hand, revealed a proud expression. She looked at Rongyue Tianlan with her big eyes and said, Brother Rongyue, this dance is my original creation. Is it nice? Beautiful. Rongyue Tian said these two words, but her heart slowly sank. He had already taken a look at Ji Xinyu's soul, but it still looked like Ji Xinyu. There was no trace of Ji Yu at all. At that time, he didn't give up, fearing that he would make a mistake in his judgment. So he used his psyche power to examine all of Ji Xinyu's other souls with his heaven's eye. There wasn't a single soul missing. Every one of them looked like her, and none of them looked like Ji Yu's. In other words, her soul had always been in perfect condition, and there was no such thing as her soul escaping and reincarnating. His previous deductions were all wrong. Ji Xinyu was Ji Xinyu. She was not Ji Yu. His hopes were dashed. Although Ji Tianyu's temperament was becoming less and less like Ji Yu's, her characteristics were becoming more and more like Ji Yu's. Their appearances were similar, their personalities were similar, and even the dance that Ji Yu left in his mind was created by Ji Tianyue. All the evidence pointed to one thing: Ji Tianyue was Ji Yu. Chapter 2858. Perhaps Ji Yu was the reincarnation of one of her souls, or perhaps Ji Tianyue was the reincarnation of Ji Yu. After all, the timeline of the Fanning continent was different from that of the previous continent. The death and reincarnation of people from different continents and different space-time could not be inferred by normal years. For example, his reincarnation of Jun Liuya died at the age of 26. On the other hand, Rongyue Tianlan's soul escaped and reincarnated more than 500 years ago. 500 years later, on the eve of Shen Jiuli's return from that continent, his soul returned, and he also succeeded in his tribulation. Therefore, he could not use the age of the two sisters to calculate who was Ji Yu. He could only compare them one by one. The result of the comparison was hopeless. Ji Tianyue was most likely Ji Yu, but he had fallen in love with another woman. Even if he knew that Ji Tianyue was Ji Yu, he still could not develop feelings for her. Rongyue Tianlan felt that he had never been so sad in his life. He did not want to let down Ji Yu in his previous life, but he also did not want to lose the happiness of this life because of his previous life. He was confused for a moment and felt that he needed to sort out his current situation. It was not suitable for him to stay here any longer. Moreover, he did not want to see Ji Xinyu care for Xie Fenglu. So he stood up and said goodbye. Sect Master Ziyin looked at him with some dissatisfaction and reminded him tactfully, Rongyue Jun, you are a good friend of mine, and you came all the way here to celebrate my birthday. You must have prepared a very special gift. I wonder if you can take it out now to broaden everyone's horizons? Rongyue Tianlan was stunned. He had suffered too many setbacks today, so his reaction was always half a beat slower. After thinking for a while, he realized that Sect Master Ziyin was asking him for a birthday gift. He came in a hurry and did not prepare to show up at this birthday banquet, so he did not prepare any gifts. Fortunately, he had brought a lot of things with him. He casually took out one. It was a bloodstone ornament, which he found when he was traveling in other continents. At that time, he felt that this bloodstone was red and festive, so he casually threw it into the storage space. After a long time he forgot about it. Now that he took it out, it was a gift for Sect Master Ziyin. The bloodstone was not big, only the size of an egg. It was shaped like a heart, and there were even veins on it. It was naturally formed and looked very rare. The Fanning continent didn't produce this. Sect Master Ziyin was very interested after seeing it. He immediately ordered Ji Xinyu. Xinyu, show it to me. The veins on Ji Xinyu's forehead bulged. Wasn't eldest senior brother always the one who received the gifts? Why was her master assigning her now? Subconsciously, she didn't want to be involved with Rongyue Tianlan. She wanted to stay as far away from him as possible. However, today was his master's birthday. His words were like an imperial edict and could not be disobeyed. She had no choice but to step forward unwillingly. She first thanked Rongyue Tian, according to the rules, and then took the bloodstone from his palm. When she took the bloodstone, her fingertips inevitably touched the gauze on his palm. Because of the movement just now, the wound on his palm had split open a little more. At this moment, The gauze was faintly dyed and looked very conspicuous. It gave her the urge to peel off the gauze to see the wound. Fortunately, she stopped this unreliable thought in time. She abruptly moved her eyes away and presented the bloodstone to her master. Grandmaster Zi Yin liked the bloodstone very much. He played with it in his hand. Chapter 2859. Ji Xinyue returned to Xie Fengliu's side. He was still weak, so she was using her telekinesis to heal him. She needed to continue. Xie Fenglu leaned weakly on the chair, paying attention to Ji Xinyue's every move. When he saw her return, he heaved a sigh of relief. My chest still hurts a little. Senior sister, can you heal my heart first? Ji Xinyue glared at him. Your heart is still beating. How can you be hurt? You're messing around again. Sit down obediently. Wait for me to open up the sealed veins on your back. Your injury will be almost healed. Yes, senior sister, be gentle and slow. If you're too fast, my veins will be in pain. I know, I didn't expect you to be so weak. You're like mud. Ji Xinyue mocked him as she tried her best to heal him. Rongyue Tianlong glanced at them, then looked away. He finally officially bid farewell. Ji Tianyue also bid farewell with him, catching up with him in a few steps. Brother Rongyue, I want to go back too. Let's go together. The two figures quickly disappeared at the door. Brother Rongyue, this place is too far away from Nantian Palace. Can you send me back? Rongyue Tianlong walked very fast. Ji Tianyue had to jog to catch up with him. After leaving the Xian sect, she couldn't help but make her request. Rongyue Tianlong stopped in his tracks and finally turned to look at her. His gaze was somewhat cold, making Ji Tianyue's heart tremble. Rongyue Tianlong looked at the little girl and suddenly felt a little funny in his heart. Rongyue Tianlong had lived a carefree life. When had he ever been unable to let go of his feelings and been schemed against by a little girl? Because he felt that she was Jiyu, and also because of the guilt from his previous life, he tolerated her many times. He tolerated her little tricks in front of him and tolerated her little habits. But his tolerance didn't mean that he had no bottom line. No matter how much he loved Jiyu in his previous life, he just couldn't fall in love with Ji Tianyue now. He even hated some of her actions more and more. His first feeling when he saw her was a headache. His second feeling was that he wanted to slap her away, forget it. Say that he had a change of heart. Say that he was heartless. He couldn't lie to himself anymore. Whether Ji Tianyue was the Jiyu of the past or not, he couldn't live with her. He was now absolutely certain of this. Ji Tianyue was not his type at all. Even if Ji Xinyue did not appear, he would not be able to convince himself to fall in love with Ji Tianyue. Love was a match of the soul, and it couldn't be forced. If he forced himself like this, wouldn't he be asking for trouble? He had tried his best, but he couldn't. He really couldn't. Even if he desperately forced himself to accept Ji Tianyue, he was afraid that in the future, they would be a resentful couple. For the sake of Jiyu's face, he could protect Ji Tianyue. But he couldn't sacrifice his own feelings, therefore. It was time to sever everything. Even if he were to be despised by the almighty couple in the future, he did not want to force himself like this. He turned to face Ji Tianyue, who was nearly a head shorter than him, with an indifferent expression. Tianyue, I think we should have a good talk. Ji Tianyue's heart jumped inexplicably, but she still looked elated. Tianyue also wants to talk to brother Rongyue. Why don't you send me back, and we can talk in the car? Rongyue Tianlong strode forward and said, there's no need. Besides, men and women shouldn't touch each other. It's not suitable for me to be alone with you. If you want to talk to me, then come with me. Chapter 2860. Ji Tianyue's intuition told her that he was not going to say anything good. She paused and took a step back. Brother Rongyu, my father is still waiting for me to go back. Let's talk later. I'll get in the car first. She whistled at the sky, and her luxurious car, which was specially made by Nantian Palace, descended from the sky and landed beside her. The two maids bowed to her and invited her to get in the car. Ji Tianyue hurriedly got into the car. She did not hear any movement from Rongyu Tianlong, so she could not help but look back. Rong Yu Tianlan did not even look back. He continued to stride forward. His faint voice came through the wind. If you don't talk now, you don't have to talk in the future. Ji Tianyue was speechless. She hesitated for a moment, but still jumped out of the car and hurriedly followed him. Rong Yu Tianlan chose a small pavilion to talk. The pavilion was like a 10-mile-long pavilion, close to a crossroad. Occasionally, pedestrians would pass by in a hurry. The place was bright and spacious. Talking here would not cause any criticism. Ji Tianyue followed him into the pavilion nervously. She forced a smile and said, "Brother Rongyu, what do you want to talk to me about?" Since Rongyu Tianlan had confirmed his feelings, he naturally did things more straightforwardly. He asked directly, "Tianyue, do you like me?" Ji Tianyue blushed. This. In the end, she stuttered and admitted, "Yes, I have always liked Brother Rongyu. I fell in love with you the first time we met. What's more, Brother Rongyu also likes Tianyue. So Tianyue is very happy." "No, I don't like you," Rongyu Tianlan interrupted her. Ji Tianyue's face turned pale. She was about to refute when Rongyu Tianlan continued, "I'm sorry to give you such a misunderstanding, but it's time to end this misunderstanding. I did treat you well, but that's because you look like a woman I once loved deeply. I loved that woman, but I can't like you. I can't agree with some of your actions. Although you look similar to her, some things in your bones are different. You and her are two different people. I can't empathize with you. So I'm sorry." Ji Tianyue's face turned even paler. She finally understood why Rongyu Tianlan was so caring towards her the moment they met. She thought that it was her charm that made this extremely outstanding man unable to resist. It turned out that it was because she resembled another woman, his former sweetheart. She panicked. "What about her? What about the woman you loved so much?" She was enlightened. "She's dead, isn't she? So when you saw me, you thought I was her reincarnation, right?" This little girl was smart enough. Rong Yuetian didn't say anything. He disdained to use lies to deceive a little girl. Ji Tianyue knew that she had guessed correctly. A light flashed in her eyes. She tried her best to straighten her back in front of him, so that he could pay attention to her. "Brother Rongyu, maybe I am her reincarnation. Although I can't remember my previous life, I had a good impression of you the moment I saw you. I have a special liking for you. Perhaps this is the result of our marriage in our previous lives. I've never liked someone so much." She stretched out her hand and wanted to pull Rongyu Tianlan's sleeve. "Brother Rongyu, you can treat me as her. I'm not afraid of being someone else's substitute, as long as you let me stay by your side." Chapter 2861. Rongyu Ishinlan took a step back. When he didn't want anyone to touch him, he wouldn't let anyone touch him. His eyes darkened. Ji might have been naive back then, but she was also proud. She could love someone without hesitation, but she would never be entangled with someone who didn't love her. If she was willing to be someone else's substitute, could that still be called love? Even if she was willing, he wasn't. He recalled the scene when Ji was dying. She hated him before she died, and didn't even want him to hug her. If she really had any wishes in her heart at that time, it would probably be to never see him again, to never cross paths with him again in the next life. If she really had the emotions of her previous life in the next life, he reckoned that she would subconsciously hate him and want to stay away from him. Instead of falling in love with him regardless of everything, was Ji Tianyue really Jiyu? Looking at it now, except for the appearance and the naive and arrogant temperament, where else did they resemble each other? Forget it. It didn't matter whether she was Jiyu or not. Whether she was Jiyu or not, he wouldn't love her. As long as he knew this, it was enough. Rongyu Ishinlan didn't want to be entangled with her anymore, so he said lightly, "No need to say any more. No matter how much you say, I won't like you or even hate you." The last sentence was very hurtful. Ji Tianyue's face turned pale, but she still didn't give up. "Brother Rongyu Ishinlan, if you did something wrong because of me, I can change. For you, I can change anything." Could something in her bones be changed? For example, selfishness and coldness. Rongyu Tianlan's sleeve shook, and a golden talisman appeared in his palm. "After all, I've caused you to have some misunderstandings. In order to compensate, I'll give you this talisman. You can use it at the most dangerous time. At that time, I'll protect you once. But that was only once. If you use it, then the debt between us will be completely settled. You're on your own now. With a flick of his fingertips, the golden talisman landed in Ji Tianyue's hand. Ji Tianyue passively caught it. When she looked up again, the gazebo was already empty, and Rongyu Ishinlin was nowhere to be found. Ji Tianyue did not expect that this would be the consequence of following them. After being stunned for a while, she burst into tears. She could no longer hold it in and shouted, "I don't want this kind of compensation. I only want you. I've already given up my reputation, but you don't want me anymore. Why? Why?" Her cries were very loud. When passers-by passed by, they trembled in fear when they heard her cries and screams. Such a beautiful little girl was actually crying and scolding like a shrew. It was too challenging to their worldview. Who was this? Who was this shrewish little girl? She was dressed very elegantly, so how could she throw a tantrum without caring about her image? She seemed to be crying because she wanted to stick to a man gradually. The pedestrians on the road gathered from afar and looked at her, as if they were looking at a Western scenery. They were all guessing her identity and background. This was probably the first time Ji Tianyue had suffered such a blow in her life. She was already a little hysterical. All she wanted to do was to vent out the grievances and injustice in her heart. She did not even realize that there were people watching. "Brother Rongyue, how can you be so cruel? For you, I traveled thousands of miles to Misty Mountain. For you, I stayed in a tent in Misty Mountain for more than 10 days. For you, I endured the ridicule of everyone. For you, I offended my sister." Chapter 2862. For you, I don't want any face. The whole continent knows that I like you. But you don't want me anymore. We're even. How can this be? You should be mine. She was crying loudly here. Her maids had already run over and wanted to persuade her to go back to the carriage, so as not to lose the princess's decorum. But Ji Tian, you had nowhere to vent her anger. The maid's persuasion only added fuel to the fire. In her anger, she pulled out her sword and slashed at the two maids. "Scram! Scram! Don't care about me. You're not good people." Fortunately, in order to protect her, the South Sky Emperor sent her maids with good martial arts, so they wouldn't be killed by her sword. The little princess was angry. The two maids didn't dare to do anything to her, and could only dodge again and again. Ji Tianyue saw that the two lowly maids didn't dare to stand there obediently and let her slash, and became even angrier. "So you're also fake to me. If the monarch wants the subjects to die, the subjects have to die. Now that I want you to die, you still dare to dodge. Rebel. Really rebel. You're dodging now, right? When I go back, I'll let my father kill your 9 generations." Her sword danced like snowflakes, as if she wanted to kill the two maids under her sword. And her last sentence also had an effect. The two maids' faces changed greatly. They were only children of a poor family. They were forced to enter the palace to be maids. Their parents and relatives were the only warmth in their hearts. If their 9 generations were killed, the two maids didn't dare to dodge. They gritted their teeth and faced the flashing sword light. People cherished their lives. Even maids were no exception. For their families, they didn't dare to dodge, and could only use their arms to block. Puff! 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 A few sounds were heard. The two maids' arms were each hit several times. Ji Tianyue used a lot of strength, and the sword in her hand was sharp. She actually managed to cut off half of the maid's arm. The other maid wasn't any better. A large piece of flesh was cut off from her arm, and the bones in her arm were also pierced through, blood splattered. The two maids each let out a miserable cry and staggered back a few steps. The onlookers were angry. At first, they thought that it was fine for a spoiled princess to throw a tantrum. They were happy to see a joke. However, when they saw that the two maids were seriously injured, and that the princess had no intention of stopping, some people could not stand it anymore. Pa! A small stone flew out of nowhere and struck Ji Tianyue's wrist. Ji Tianyue felt a sharp pain in her wrist. She could no longer hold the sword in her hand, and it fell to the ground with a clang. Who Which bastard dares to attack me? Are you tired of living? Ji Tianyue's eyes were bloodshot as she looked at the people around her. At this moment, she no longer had the dignity of a princess. Instead, she looked more like a bloodstained demon. There were more than a dozen onlookers, young and old men and women, but they really didn't know who threw the stone. However, everyone looked at her with anger and disdain. These people were dressed very plainly. They should be the villagers of the nearby mountains, and there were no nobles of special status. A group of lowly commoners dared to attack a noble princess. Ji Tianyue almost grew up in the palace. In the palace, she could get whatever she wanted. No one had ever disobeyed her. Now, she encountered people who challenged her dignity as a princess one after another. Not only was she abandoned by the person she loved, she was also ridiculed by a group of lowly commoners. Chapter 2863. The fire in Ji Tianyue's heart, that was already burning, rose half a day high. She bent down to pick up the sword, looked at the people around her, and coldly ordered the two injured maids. Kill these lowly people who dare to offend me. The two maids were in so much pain that their faces turned pale. They were desperately pressing their acupoints to stop the bleeding, and when they heard the order, they were stunned. The ground under their feet did not move. Ji Tianyue angrily said, "Didn't you hear my order? Princess, you can't kill the innocent. His Majesty has said it before." One of the maids tried to refute. Her broken arm was still on the ground, and she was in so much pain that she was about to faint, but she still held on. "Innocent? They are not innocent. They dared to attack this princess. That is an act of treason and rebellion. If you kill them, this consort will forgive your disrespect towards this consort and spare your lives. Otherwise, not only will you die, but your families will also die with you." The two maids each staggered a step back. "Princess, they are not the subjects of the Nantiung clan. Even if they are not the subjects of the Nantiung clan, how can they be so disrespectful to the princess of the Nantiung clan? There is no such thing in the world. Lowly people are lowly people. No matter where they go, they are lowly people." Ji Tianyue curled her lips in disdain. There were indeed many ordinary people in the surrounding onlookers, and ordinary people did not dare to provoke the nobles. However, it was rare to see a foreign princess being so arrogant in their territory. Ordinary people were already hostile to the nobles, and now this princess was so arrogant and despotic that it aroused their hatred for a common enemy. These people looked at each other, pulled out their weapons, and looked at the master and the two maids. Their eyes flashed with a fierce light, especially when they looked at Ji Tianyue. Their eyes were full of hatred. Lowly people. She actually called them lowly people. So what if they were lowly people? Could lowly people be casually killed by this so-called princess? They looked around. This place was very desolate, and they could not see anyone. If they killed the princess here, no one would know. There was no lack of martial arts among the onlookers, and two of them were even quite good at it. Even if a hot-blooded man was at the bottom of society, he would not be able to endure such humiliation. There were already people who wanted to kill this princess to vent their anger. Although the sword in the princess's hand was not bad, her kung fu was not good enough. In the eyes of a martial arts expert, it was not enough. It shouldn't be difficult for them to kill her. As for the two maidservants, not only were they heavily injured at this moment, they even hated the princess. Even if they attacked, the two maidservants might not be willing to sincerely protect the princess. This was a very simple logic, and everyone quickly understood. They looked at each other and stepped forward with their weapons in hand. Someone sneered and scolded. "A little shrew like you is called a princess? Don't embarrass the princess. She's probably that Ji Tianyue who was chasing after that man. She heard that when Her Highness Rongyu went to Misty Mountain, she didn't even ride in the same carriage as her. In order to force Rongyu to comply, she purposely created public opinion outside, saying that Her Highness Rongyu was with her. TSK, how shameless. That's right. Only a shameless princess would do such a thing to ruin her own reputation. She probably wants to use fait accompli to force Her Highness Rongyu to comply, right? Unfortunately, Rongyu did not buy it. Chapter 2864. She probably wants to use fait accompli to force Her Highness Rongyue to submit? Unfortunately, she didn't fall for it at all. Now she's saying that she abandoned her after seducing her. Did she seduce her? Seduce her, my ass. Everything is just her own wishful thinking. I heard that although Her Highness Rongyue sent her back from Misty Mountain, she didn't even ride in the same carriage as her. She did it out of concern and kindness for the child, but she misunderstood. She's too shameless. She snatched her own brother-in-law so righteously, but she still made a scene here when she couldn't. TSK, she's really unparalleled in the world when she's shameless. Since these people already had the intention to silence her, they naturally didn't have any scruples when they spoke. Of course, they also spoke the truth. There was no such thing as an airtight wall. Ji Tianyue's running after Rongyue Tianlan, and her performance in Misty Mountain, had already been recorded in the Jianghu. It was just that it didn't reach Ji Tianyue's ears. This was the first time Ji Tianyue heard this, and she was furious. Her hand holding the sword was trembling. Kill them. You two useless things are just going to let them slander me. Kill. 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 Otherwise, I'll exterminate your 9 generations. My 2 maidservants. Why are you still risking your lives for such a princess? She stabbed you until you're seriously injured, and she doesn't even see you as human beings. Why are you still working for her? Someone began to persuade the 2 maidservants. You're already crippled. Even if you go back, she won't want you anymore. If she's slightly dissatisfied, she'll say that she'll exterminate your 9 generations. How many of your 9 generations can be exterminated by her? It's better to go all out and kill her now, so that she can't bully you anymore. Those people didn't want to make more enemies, so they tried their best to pull the 2 maidservants into their camp. The 2 maidservants were seriously injured, and what they needed most was treatment, but they were pushed into a dilemma. These onlookers had helped them just now, and they were very grateful, so they didn't want to attack these people. However, they could not listen to these people and turn against them. It wasn't that they were blindly loyal to the princess, but that the South Heaven Emperor had placed the princess's safety in their hands. If they couldn't protect her and let her be killed here, then what awaited them when they returned was a cruel death. If they didn't return and directly escaped from here, then their families would also be implicated. That would be the true crime of exterminating their entire family. None of their family members would be able to escape. This was the sorrow of being a lowly maid. They were helpless. Furthermore, this princess definitely had more than 2 maids by her side. She also had shadow guards. Otherwise, why would the South Heaven Emperor be willing to let her out like this? These shadow guards wouldn't appear easily, but once they did, it would be an absolute killer move. These people were no match for these shadow guards. They had already unsheathed their swords, and were desperately using their eyes to signal these people to leave. Unfortunately, these people were born in the countryside, so they couldn't think so thoroughly. Apart from a few people who began to retreat, the majority of the people did not retreat, but instead advanced, surrounding them from all sides. Ji Tianyu sneered. A bunch of country bumpkins wanted to challenge her. The princess? They must be tired of living. She raised her hand and shot out a firework. That was the signal to summon the shadow guards. Once these shadow guards arrived, these commoners could forget about escaping. Chapter 2865. One of the maids was quite chivalrous. In a hurry, she flew up and used her sleeves to extinguish the firework that had yet to rise into the air. She shouted, "You guys run. You'll be finished when the shadow guards arrive." Everyone was stunned. Only then did they understand. They shouted and scattered in all directions. Ji Tianyue was furious. Her people were actually siding with outsiders. She raised her hand and released 3 or 4 more fireworks. At the same time, she held her sword and charged towards the maid. "I'll kill you, you bitch!" The maid couldn't stop her in time, and could only watch as the 3 or 4 fireworks rose into the sky. A moment later, 8 shadow guards in black appeared out of thin air. Ji Tianyue gave an order, and the 8 shadow guards immediately chased after the fleeing people. These shadow guards were all well trained, and were the elites of the Nantiang clan. It was not difficult to deal with these commoners who knew some martial arts. Ji Tianyue only gave them one order: kill. Kill all of them without leaving a single one alive. Because they had offended the dignity of a princess. There was no right or wrong in the eyes of the shadow guards, only the master's orders. Therefore, these people's butcher's knives were directed towards the commoners. The two maids were full of despair. One of them was still being chased by Ji Tianyue, while the other knelt down in front of Ji Tianyue. Princess, they are just commoners. Although they have offended the princess, their crime is not worthy of death. Princess, you have always been merciful. You can't even bear to hurt little rabbits and butterflies. Why do you have to kill people? This must not be your intention, right? Ji Tianyue was slashing at the maid who didn't dare to fight back. Hearing the other maid's pleas, she kicked her fiercely. Scram. There is only one word for anyone who offends the princess' dignity: death. She kicked the maid on her injured arm and sent her tumbling to the ground. The other maid was hit again. Her shoulder blade was almost cut off by Ji Tianyue's sword. The maid screamed and fell to the ground. Ji Tianyue stabbed the maid's heart with her sword. Go to hell, bitch. Chi. A sharp sound was heard. A light green stream of air directly attacked Ji Tianyue's wrist. Ji Tianyue's wrist shook, and the sword flew out of her hand and into the sky. In the sky, it seemed to have encountered some fatal airflow. In the blink of an eye, it turned into pieces and fell to the ground. Ji Tianyue's wrist hurt like a knife. She jumped up. Who? Who dares to attack the princess? It's me. A cold voice came from the sky. The voice was clear and cold, but it spread to every corner of the wilderness. Everyone stop. The maid who had just escaped death was stunned for a moment before she jumped up. Third princess. The other maid was already in despair, but after hearing this voice, she seemed to be revived. She said in a trembling voice, Third princess, it's the third princess. Although the shadow guards who were chasing after the commoners were under Ji Tianyue's command, they were only protecting her under the emperor's orders. They had to obey any princess or prince of the royal family. Therefore, Ji Xinyu's words were very shocking. Those shadow guards immediately kept their weapons and stood in place. As for the commoners, they had heard of the reputation of the third princess and knew that she was chivalrous. Their hearts moved and they stopped running. Ji Tianyue appeared very quickly. Just as her voice fell, she also appeared out of thin air and landed in front of Ji Tianyue. Chapter 2866. She was still wearing the dress she wore during the sword dance. It was obvious that she had rushed here directly from the banquet. Ji Tianyue's expression changed slightly when she saw her. Third sister. Ji Xinyue looked around and stopped at the two maids who had been cut so badly that they almost didn't look human anymore. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Her gaze was as cold as ice and fell directly on Ji Tianyue. Ji Tianyue, what's going on? Although there was already hostility between the two sisters, this was the first time Ji Xinyue looked at her with such a cold gaze. Ji Tianyue instinctively shrank back and blinked her eyes, tears already coming out. Third sister, you hurt me. Originally, when she cried, her third sister would comfort her and even hug her. But now Ji Xinyue's gaze was as cold as ice. She was not moved at all. Explain. Her little sister would usually be sad for a long time, even when a rabbit was hurt, and would ask the imperial doctor to treat it. But now, she had hurt two maids like this. What was the reason? The two maids were almost covered in blood and trembled on the ground. Third princess, save us. Third princess. Please ask Princess Tianyue not to hurt our family. No matter what, it's our fault. It has nothing to do with our family. The maid who had lost an arm and was being chased by Ji Tianyue knelt on the ground, her other hand still holding a sword. Third princess. Although we have disobeyed the little princess's orders, we had no choice. We definitely did not want to rebel. This servant is willing to die as an apology, but please don't harm my family. She turned her hand and slashed the sword at her own neck. Ji Xinyue was extremely fast. With a flick of her finger, the sword in the maid's hand flew out. Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth first. Ji Xinyue's voice was cold. She had rushed here in a hurry and was still confused about the details. Naturally, She wanted to find out the truth first before making a decision. The two maids were heavily injured, but they could still hold on. Ji Xinyue waved her sleeve and brushed it over their bodies. With this wave, she had already used a spell to stop their bleeding, so their lives were not in danger for now. Her wave even had an anesthetic effect, reducing the pain on the two maids by half. Third sister, it's them who are treacherous. They actually sided with these bandits and wanted to rebel against me. Ji Tianyue was the first to cry out. Tears fell down her cheeks as she felt extremely wronged. Ji Xinyu was already immune to her tears and directly looked at the two maids. Do you have anything to say? The two maids prostrated themselves on the ground. They were mid-level maids in the palace and were not well informed, but they still knew that Ji Xinyu had always doted on her little sister. If the little princess was occasionally bullied, the third princess would definitely help her little sister get back at her. Now would she uphold justice for these lowly people? For a moment, neither of the two maids dared to speak. Ji Tianyue said coldly from the side, "You'd better not talk nonsense. Otherwise, even if this princess has a good temper, I won't forgive you." The two maids trembled even more, not daring to open their mouths. Ji Tianyue's threat might have felt flawless, but in Ji Xinyue's eyes, it was child's play. She sneered, "You two only need to speak the truth. Remember, this palace master only wants to hear the truth. Don't even think about it." Third sister, they will talk nonsense. They haven't even said anything yet. How can you say that they are talking nonsense? Ji Tianyue, are you feeling guilty? Ji Xinyue's words were sharp. Chapter 2867. Ji Tianyue. She glared fiercely at the two maids. "I don't believe you dare to spout nonsense." These words startled the two maids, causing them to shrink back again. "As long as you don't spout nonsense, I can let your families go and not implicate you. Otherwise," Ji Tianyue threatened them. Ji Xinyu looked at all of this coldly. She originally thought that her sister was despicable, but she wouldn't hurt the two maids like this if they hadn't done anything wrong. Now that she saw their reactions, Ji Xinyu roughly deduced the truth. "Tianyue, you said that these two maids colluded with outsiders to harm you?" "Yes, that's right. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and summoned the shadow guards in time, so I was able to avert the danger." Ji Xinyu picked up the severed arm from the ground and looked at the cut on it. She said carelessly, "This arm was also cut off after you summoned the shadow guards to punish the two maids?" "Yes." Ji Xinyu turned to ask the shadow guards, "When did you appear? Did you appear after seeing the summoning fireworks?" The shadow guards had a strong sense of time, so they immediately agreed and told her the time they appeared. Ji Xinyu turned to look at Ji Tianyue. "Look at the cut on this arm. It has been cut off for at least 3/4 of an hour. And you summoned the shadow guards for at most half an hour, which means that you were the one who cut them first." Ji Tianyue didn't expect her to be waiting for her here. After a moment of shock, she corrected herself. "I remembered wrongly. They were the ones who attacked me first. I slashed them out of self-defense. The two of them suddenly attacked you together?" Ji Xinyu didn't change her expression. "Yes, that's right. Very good." Ji Xinyu smiled, but her smile was cold. "According to my calculations, these two maids are at the 5th level of martial strength. And Tianyue, your martial strength is at the 3rd level. 2 high-level martial strength ambushing a low-level martial strength, and still being cut to this state by the low-level martial strength, Ji Tianyue. Do you really think your third sister is an idiot?" Ji Xinyu rolled around in a pile of blades all year round, so she was very good at analyzing injuries. No one could hide from her. Ji Tianyue usually only saw her gentle love for her, but she didn't know what ability her third sister had. At this moment, she was stunned by Ji Xinyu's question, but she still defended herself. "That's because my sister was attacked and knew it was dangerous, so she fought back with all her might." "Sister, haven't you heard that one person's life? Your martial strengths so far apart, you can achieve this effect, I've learned." Ji Xinyu's. "If you two were to fight, how much power can you use?" From Ji Xinyu's words just now, The two maids had already vaguely understood that this third princess really wanted to uphold justice, and was not biased towards her younger sister without any reason. Their courage immediately grew by a lot, and they also dared to speak the truth. Tianyue, est. Ji Xinyu looked at Ji Tianyue again. Her wrist was a little red and swollen, but she didn't see any other injuries. Ji Xinyu raised her hand and threw a small bottle of ointment to Ji Tianyue. Use this to rub your wrist, the swelling will subside. Ji Tianyue didn't know what her sister was up to, but she accepted the ointment. Chapter 2868. Ji Tianyue didn't know what her sister was up to. She took the ointment and tentatively touched her wrist. It was cool and comfortable, and also stopped the pain. She immediately smoothed out the red and swollen areas on her wrist. Ji Xinyu's ointment had a miraculous effect on this kind of injury. Ji Tianyue's wrist quickly became less swollen. Ji Xinyu casually took out a sword and handed it to her. Use this to protect yourself. Ji Tianyue was overjoyed. She thought that Ji Xinyu finally believed her, and immediately took it. Ji Xinyu crossed her arms. Let me see 2 sword flowers. Ji Tianyue wanted to show off her skills. She really did use the sword to make 3 or 4 sword flowers. The sword flowers were scattered, and they looked quite good and had a lot of strength. Looks like Tianyue's wrist has recovered. Looking at your sword flowers, you should be able to use 70 to 80% of your power. Ji Tianyue nodded. Should be about right. Ji Xinyu took a step back. That's good. She turned to look at the 2 maids. Since Tianyue said that you were the ones who ambushed her, then you must have used all your strength. Now you can attack her again. Let me see if she will be cut to this state. She then looked at the pale Ji Tianyue. At that time, they were not injured, and yet you were able to cut them to this state. Now they can't even use 30 to 40% of their power. If they fight you again, they will only be at a disadvantage. Don't you think so? Ji Tianyue. She didn't think that her sister would dig such a trap for her to jump into. She was stunned for a moment, then refuted. Sister, you know that I'm timid. I don't even dare to kill a chicken. If I wasn't forced, I wouldn't have cut them to this state. Now I'm regretting it. I can't cut them anymore. I don't want to fight them again. Even if you don't want it, you still have to. Ji Xinyu didn't have any room for negotiation. They will use all their strength. If you don't use all your strength, you will be killed by them. She then instructed the 2 maids. Now you don't need to ambush them. Just fight openly. You only need to use all your strength. Only then can we truly restore the truth. The eyes of the 2 maids lit up slightly, but they still had some misgivings. If we hurt the little princess, will our families be exterminated? This was what they were most concerned about. Ji Xinyu only replied with 2 words. No. The eyes of the 2 maids immediately lit up. 2 pairs of eyes looked at Ji Tianyue. They had suffered a lot in front of Ji Tianyue. Every day, they would be beaten and scolded. Now that they had been crippled by her, the hatred in their hearts had long since filled their chests. It was only for the sake of the safety of their families that they had been holding back. Now that there was such an opportunity, they would really be fools if they were to be timid. Ji Tianyue shuddered. No, I don't want to. 2 maids covered in blood had already rushed over with their bare hands. Although the 2 maids only had 30 to 40% of their martial arts left, their skills were much higher than Ji Tianyue's. Coupled with their rich experience in fighting enemies, how could the weak Ji Tianyu be their opponent? In just 3 moves, Ji Tianyue was sent flying twice. This was also because the 2 maids didn't have any swords in their hands, and Ji Tianyue had the advantage of carrying a sword. If the 2 maids also had swords in their hands, Ji Tianyue's body would probably have a few more holes. Chapter 2869. Ji Tianyue's hair was disheveled and her clothes were in a mess. When she was kicked out, she hit the railing of the pavilion. Not only was there a bruise on her stomach, even her back was in pain, and she almost fainted. She was scared and angry as she desperately pounced towards the shadow guards. Why aren't you protecting me? While the shadow guards were stunned, Ji Xinyu's voice rang out. They are just simulating the scene. You don't have to do anything if the shadow guards are not involved. If anything happens, I'll take responsibility. Since the third princess had said so, the shadow guards were happy to not bother about this matter. When they saw Ji Tianyue pouncing over, they all dodged. As for the commoners who were once chased, when they saw the princess being beaten, they all felt elated and started to gather from afar. Since they had already made their move, the two maids also threw caution to the wind. Being crippled like this, they had no intention of living. As long as their family members were not harmed, they would naturally take revenge. It didn't matter if they didn't have a sword or a weapon, they still had hands and legs. Palm shadows filled the sky as they moved around Ji Tianyue like they were flying. Ji Tianyue didn't receive any help, and she was completely panicking. Like a little lunatic, she waved her sword wildly. Although the sound of her slashing was like the wind, she couldn't even touch a corner of the two maids' clothes. Pfft! She was hit in the chest again, and she saw stars. Before she could react, she was kicked in the waist again, and her body flew out again. This time, she flew out at the wrong angle, and her head directly hit a huge rock. She hurriedly raised her arm, wanting to use her sword to block the momentum. However, the force of her collision was too great. The sword did hit the rock, but after piercing halfway, the sword broke with a cracking sound. Instead, her face slammed into the sword's edge. If this hit, Ji Tianyue's head would be cut in half. Ji Tianyue almost fainted from fright. She screamed, "Help!" and closed her eyes. A red rope flew over in time and wrapped around her waist. With a swing, Ji Tianyue fell to the ground with her head and legs upside down, finally avoiding the disaster of being cut in half. It was her first time experiencing this kind of life and death situation, and her eyes were wide open. He stood there in a daze, unable to react for a moment. Those shadow guards also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although the third princess said that she would take responsibility for this matter, if the little princess was really killed here, they would still be punished when they returned. Therefore, it was a good thing that the little princess was saved. Ji Xinyu retracted the red rope around her wrist and looked at her coldly. "Aren't you able to risk your life in a life-and-death situation? Would they be able to defeat them? Why not now?" They didn't even have weapons, yet they still suffered such heavy injuries. "Where are your skills?" Ji Tianyue burst into tears. This time, she was crying for real, without the slightest bit of water. However, she had been beaten up after all, so she couldn't cry out even if she wanted to. This was because if she exerted any force, her stomach would hurt so much that she would cry and suck in a breath of cold air. Coupled with her disheveled hair and swollen face, she looked particularly comical. The two maids were actually eager to give it a try. In any case, they had already beaten up the princess. Even if it was a capital offense, they had already committed it. He wished he could kick this princess a few more times, and slap her a few more times. However, it was obvious that the princess wasn't going to fight anymore, so they naturally couldn't take the initiative to charge forward. Chapter 2870. You're bullying me. Third sister, you're biased towards these bitches. You used to love me a lot, but now you're working with outsiders to bully your own sister. You must hate me for stealing your fiancé, right? That's why you're here to take revenge. Ji Tianyue was ashamed and angry, and began to speak without thinking. I'm only reasonable. Ji Xinyu's voice was calm. As for the fiancé you mentioned, he was indeed my fiancé, but I didn't break off the engagement because of you. If I wasn't willing, do you think you could steal him? A lover who can be stolen is not worth keeping. Don't you understand this principle? This was the first time Ji Tianyue, you had been taught a lesson like this. Now that the fight was over, her temper rose again, and she looked at Ji Xinyu with eyes that were about to spit fire. You're just jealous of me. You're taking revenge on me. You don't have to make it sound so nice. They were clearly the ones who offended my dignity as a princess. They were clearly in the wrong, but you used tricks to make them attack me, too despicable. I'm going to tell father. Father will uphold justice for me. She then looked at the two maids, her eyes full of hatred. You actually dared to attack me. When I return, I'll exterminate your 9 generations. I'll first throw your family members into prison, then torture them to death. Before she could finish her venomous words, she heard a "pa" sound. Her right cheek was fiercely slapped. This slap was extremely heavy, and she was forced back a few steps, falling to the ground with a plop. She covered her mouth and looked at Ji Xinyu in disbelief. You hit me?" "Yes, I hit you. And I'm teaching you a lesson as your elder sister." Ji Xinyu's face was also ashen, and she said word by word. "Ji Tianyu, you're a princess, not a shrew on the streets. You have to take care of your own identity. I originally thought that you were just a little willful, and a little selfish because you were spoiled. But I didn't expect you to become like this. Full of lies, arrogant and despotic, vicious and willful, selfish and heartless. If I don't teach you a lesson, who knows what you'll do in the future? It doesn't matter if you're embarrassing yourself, but you're embarrassing the entire Nantiang clan." When Ji Xinyu said this, she was still speaking from her older sister's position. She was truly lecturing her younger sister. Ji Tianyue flew into a rage out of humiliation. She jumped up and blurted out, "Embarrassing? You still have the cheek to say it's embarrassing. The one who truly shamed the Nantiang clan is you. Who was it that was scolded as an abandoned woman and a jinx? Who was it that became the laughingstock of the Nantiang clan? It's you. I have always been Imperial Father's pride. You must be jealous of me. It must be because Brother Rongyu hates me. So he's suppressing me here, deliberately making things difficult for me. They damaged my dignity as a princess. I wanted to get back at them, but not only did you not help me, you even joined forces with them to bully me. I don't want to acknowledge you as my sister anymore. I want to sever all ties with you." She was making false accusations here, and the onlookers at the side could no longer listen to her. Someone stood up and exposed her, telling her how she had been crying and yelling here, and how her maids had come to console her. But she had vented all her anger on the maids, heavily injuring them, and then forced the maids to kill the surrounding people to silence them. This person was quick to speak, and spoke in an orderly manner. He did not exaggerate, nor did he simplify anything. He explained the matter clearly and clearly. Chapter 2871. Ji Xinyu looked at Ji Tianyu, as if she was looking at a real stranger. "What do you have to say now?" Ji Tianyu refused to admit it. "He's talking nonsense." Ji Xinyu said angrily. "You still dare to quibble? I've already checked the wounds on their bodies. I can tell the direction of your sword from the depth of the cut. They were clearly the ones who were passively cut by you. They didn't even fight back. If they really wanted to sneak attack you, do you think you would still be alive now?" Ji Tianyu. Ji Xinyu glanced at her, cut off a piece of cloth and threw it in front of her. "I also don't have a sister like you. From today onwards, you and I have nothing to do with each other. Let's sever our sisterhood." Ji Tianyu was stunned. She stood in place. You can't." Not only was she abandoned by Rongyue Tianlan, now she was also abandoned by her own sister. What did she do? Why did they all treat her like this? Bullying her because she was young. They were all bullying children. Ji Xinyu didn't even look at her, and directly said to the two maids, "If you don't mind, you can follow me. I will arrange a place for you." The two maids originally thought they were going to die, but hearing her words, they were overjoyed, but they still cared about their families. "It is our blessing that third princess is willing to take us in. But our families are still in the capital. We are afraid that little princess will take revenge." Ji Xinyu had already thought of this. "I will write a letter to father, explaining everything clearly. Father is a wise ruler. He will not take his anger out on your families. If you are willing, after you have settled down, you can bring your families here to live together." The two maids fell to their knees and kowtowed to Ji Xinyu. "Thank you, third princess. From now on, we will follow third princess, go through fire and water, sacrifice our lives. We will not refuse." These two maids were also stubborn. They didn't shed a single tear when they were cut to this extent, but now they were so excited that tears filled their eyes. "I didn't take you in to ask you to repay me. Let's talk about it after you've recovered." Ji Xinyu took out some of the best medicine for wounds and handed it to each of them. This kind of golden sword medicine was the best in the Southern Sky Clan. Usually, only high officials, nobles, and some of the upper echelons of the sect could obtain it. These maids were rarely seen. Now, as they held the medicine in their hands, they couldn't help but cry. The surrounding commoners looked at Ji Xinyu with admiration in their eyes. They all applauded and cheered for her actions. This was the demeanor of a princess. Not to mention a princess. Even a prince might not have such a demeanor. It was a pity that she was a woman. If she were a man, she would definitely be conferred the title of crown prince and become an emperor in the future. Ji Tianyue stood in place. Her face, stomach, and body were in pain. She wished she could roll on the bed and let people take care of her. She wanted all the imperial physicians to surround her. But now, she was like a piece of trash that no one cared about. No one even looked at her. Even those shadow guards acted as though they didn't see her. They only needed to ensure that she was alive. As for whether her heart was hurt or not, sorry. It was not within their scope of responsibility. Ji Xinyu quickly finished writing the letter and handed it to the leader of the shadow guards, asking him to present it to the Southern Sky Emperor. The leader of the shadow guards naturally agreed and put the letter away. Then, Ji Xinyu left with the two maids, not looking at Ji Tianyue again. Chapter 2872. The onlookers dispersed with a bang. Ji Tianyue stood alone in the same spot, feeling a sense of loneliness, as if she had been abandoned by the world. She touched the golden talisman that Rongyue Tianlan had given her in her sleeve. When she was being beaten up just now, she wanted to activate the talisman several times. But when she thought that once she activated it, Rongyue Tianlan would really go their separate ways after saving her again, she resisted the urge. She had to use such an important thing when she needed it the most. She wouldn't use it whenever she encountered a little difficulty. She climbed onto the carriage with great difficulty and got into the carriage. Two shadow guards came up to drive the carriage for her, while the other shadow guards hid themselves and followed. Happy face, carrot. After the prosperity comes loneliness. Now that my birthday has passed, you all have worked hard, so you can all go home. We will gather again next year. The next morning, Grandmaster Ziyin gathered all the disciples in his room and instructed. Every year after their master's birthday, there would be a reflection and conclusion, and all the disciples were used to it. Grandmaster Ziyun's 9 disciples had all finished their apprenticeship, other than eldest senior brother Feng Wuji, who stayed by their master's side all year round. The other disciples all had their own family businesses, and some even had grand-disciples. Only on Grandmaster Ziyun's birthday could all the disciples gather together. Actually, everyone understood that the reason why their master was so busy with his birthday was to find an opportunity for everyone to really gather and bond. After so many years of contact, everyone's feelings were generally very deep, and every time they broke up, there would be a period of melancholy. Ji Shenyue was also a little melancholy. Everyone else had a home to return to, but she was always floating outside. Other than her mother, all her relatives were not like family. Shenyue. Grandmaster Ziyin suddenly called out her name, calling her back to her senses. Your birthday banquet this time was excellent. It was unique. Master is very satisfied. Master has decided that next year's birthday banquet will be yours too. Ji Shenyue was speechless. She had already racked her brains for a birthday banquet. Wouldn't another one take her life? She was not the kind of person who was full of tricks. She couldn't help but look towards eldest senior brother, hoping that the omnipotent eldest senior brother would save her. The almighty eldest senior brother gave her a look of relief, and Ji Xinyu's pretty face fell. She raised her head to look at her master again. Her master supported his chin with one hand and looked at her expectantly. As if he could see her dilemma, her master suggested, "You can find a senior or junior brother to be your assistant." Was her master asking her to drag someone down with her? That's great. Eldest senior brother had always been in charge of the birthday banquet. He was the most experienced. Since he needed a deputy, he naturally had to look for eldest senior brother. When the time came, she would just have to put the burden on eldest senior brother's shoulders. Ji Xinyu immediately said, "All right then, I'll invite Big." Before she could finish her sentence, a person took a step forward and cut her off. "Master, Disciple is willing to be senior sister's assistant. I guarantee that master's birthday banquet next year will be done properly. The one who spoke was Xie Fenglu, Ji Xinyue's ninth junior brother. Ji Xinyu's words were stuck in her throat, unable to continue. Grandmaster Ziyin looked at his little disciple with a smile that was not a smile. That will depend on whether your senior sister is willing or not. Master said that she can choose her own assistant. Xie Fenglu immediately looked at Ji Xinyu. Senior sister, you will agree, right? Senior sister, I am the best assistant. If senior sister wants me to go east, I will definitely not go west. If senior sister wants me to beat a dog, I will definitely not scold a chicken. If senior sister has something to tell me, I will definitely complete it 200% of the time. I can even give senior sister some ideas or something. Chapter 2873. He looked at her eagerly, his watery eyes full of sincerity. The veins on Ji Xinyu's forehead bulged, but she couldn't bear to hurt his little heart. She naturally couldn't say no, so she nodded in agreement. Xie Fenglio's eyes immediately lit up, and he stood side by side with Ji Xinyu. Senior sister, we still have a year, we can discuss it slowly. In other words, he could be tied to Ji Xinyu for a year. The veins on Ji Xinyu's forehead bulged again. She was used to being a lone wolf, and was the type of person who ate her fill, and didn't have to worry about the whole family. Now, it was as if she had a large burden by her side, and one that was especially noisy. She intuitively felt that her future days would probably be very peaceful. Sect Master Ziyin smiled and agreed. He was very satisfied. This little disciple of his had the most clever ideas, and could be said to be a clever person with all kinds of tricks. It was just that this brat was usually quite lazy. There were several times when Sect Master Ziyin wanted him to hold a birthday banquet for him. But this brat would always use one reason or another to refuse. Now he had delivered himself to his doorstep. The two maids were too heavily injured, so Ji Xinyu invited the best doctor in Sect Master Ziyin to treat them. This doctor was very famous in the Sanning continent, and was known as a divine doctor. The cheapest medicine he refined was worth thousands of gold, and it was the kind that was priceless. He only treated the people of Sect Master Ziyin, and even the 4 emperors might not be able to invite him. The 2 maids had only heard of this doctor's name before, and in their eyes, this doctor was like a god floating in the clouds, and was thousands of miles away from people of their status. Normally, they wouldn't even have the chance to smell the medicine he casually made, let alone treat them. Now that such a high and mighty doctor had personally come to treat them, they were both nervous and touched. The other injuries on the 2 men's bodies were better. They were not a problem for the doctor. However, the broken arm could not be reattached, because it had been separated from the body for too long. Even so, the 2 maids were very satisfied. No one could really disregard life and death. As long as they could live, they still wanted to live. Moreover, the sword wounds on their bodies were easily treated by this divine doctor. According to the divine doctor, as long as they took good care of themselves, their sword wounds wouldn't even leave a scar after they were healed. After all, they had been with Ji Tianyu for a while, and Ji Tianyu was usually quite harsh to them, and didn't treat them as real people at all. This also caused them to have suspicious personalities. When Ji Xinyu saved them, other than being grateful, they were also a little suspicious in their hearts. They suspected that this 3rd princess saved them because she wanted to get some information from their mouths, and that she had a purpose. Of course, if Ji Xinyu really had such a goal, they would think it was normal, and would be happy to answer. They were even prepared for Xinyu's. But after, they didn't expect Ji Tianyu, and Tianyu by Tianyu's. Only when their wounds had scabbed over, and they could move normally did she send someone to deliver them gold, 100 taels each. It was enough for them to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. And they didn't have to be maids anymore. And they didn't have to live a life of bloodshed. They had even received letters from their own families, telling them that they had been arranged to live in a place with beautiful scenery and tranquil waters. Chapter 2874. They had even received letters from their families, saying that they had been arranged to live in a place with beautiful mountains and clear waters. Each family had been given several acres of land, enough for them to be self-sufficient and live a peaceful life. Their families hoped that they would return home to reunite and live a peaceful life together. When the two maids received the letters from their families, they both cried. This was a happy life that they didn't even dare to imagine. They didn't expect that this disaster would be a blessing in disguise. The third princess had done it for them. At this point, they didn't want to go back anymore. They wanted to truly stay by Ji Xinyu's side and be her maids. They directly went to the courtyard where Ji Xinyu was, wanting to see her. Ji Xinyu seemed to be about to go out, but when she saw them, she was surprised. I heard from Marshal Niece Wu that your injuries are almost healed. Is there anything else? The two maids knelt down together and told her their intentions, wholeheartedly wanting to be her maids. Ji Xinyu frowned slightly. She was used to being independent and didn't need maids at all. The reason why she saved them was because she felt that her sister had ruined someone else's life, so she wanted to make up for it. Although she had already broken off relations with that sister, and her sins had nothing to do with her. But in the end, they were both princesses of the Nantiang clan. She was compensating them on behalf of the royal family, not to mention that doing this was as easy as lifting a finger. She shook her head. I don't need maids. You don't have to do this. Go and reunite with your family. She walked out with large strides. The two maids knew that she really didn't want anything in return, so they were even more grateful. One of the maids pursed her lips and followed closely. Third princess, this servant has something to say to you. Ji Xinyu stood still and raised her eyebrows. What is it? The maid took a deep breath and said, logically speaking, this servant shouldn't say these things. After all, this servant used to be the little princess's maid, so I shouldn't say anything bad about her. No matter what happened, I shouldn't betray my master for glory. But this is a serious matter, and this servant is afraid that the third princess won't know the truth and will suffer. So I decided to say it. The third princess needs to be careful of the little princess. Most of the bad rumors about the third princess were spread by the little princess. Ji Xinyu was startled and frowned at her. The maidservant smiled sadly. This servant knows that it sounds like I'm trying to sow discord, but that's the truth. Some of them were even sent by this servant under orders. For example, the third princess was a jinx, the third princess was ugly and immoral, etc. Even the rumors about the third princess were spread back to the palace by the little princess. She purposely let His Majesty hear it, and make His Majesty hate the third princess more and more. Ji Xinyu. She suddenly had a funny feeling. She looked at the maid and said, I've treated her well. What's her purpose for doing this? The maid shook her head slightly. We as servants don't know what the little princess is thinking. She won't tell us either. She just told us to do as she says. The other maidservant hesitated for a moment before saying, this servant might know something. The little princess probably did that because she wanted to monopolize the third princess's love. If he wanted to monopolize her, he would have to ruin her. This logic was too heaven-defying. Ji Xinyu expressed that she did not understand. The maid gave an example. The little princess once got a very delicate pink chinchilla. The chinchilla looked cute and gentle. Everyone liked it very much and fought to feed it. Chapter 2875. The pink chinchilla also kissed everyone and pounced on everyone it saw, which made the little princess very unhappy. Later, she ordered everyone not to pay attention to the chinchilla, let alone play with it. If they saw the chinchilla, they had to kick it. Everyone did not understand the princess's meaning, but since the princess said so, everyone could only do as she said. Later, no one liked the chinchilla. Only the little princess was still very good to it. She personally fed it, spoke to it gently, and even took it to play in the garden. Gradually, the chinchilla no longer cared about everyone. It was only close to the little princess, and the two of them were inseparable. Ji Xinyu. She did know about the chinchilla, because it was not given to her by someone else. It was caught by Xie Fenglu from deep in the mountains. That chinchilla's big round eyes were like a group of pink snowballs. It was so cute. Xie Fenglu originally gave the chinchilla to her, but because she did not have a fixed residence, she was afraid that the chinchilla would suffer with her. So she gave it to her sister, who always liked small animals. She raised the chinchilla for 3 or 4 days, and it was very docile and clever. But when she returned to the palace and saw the chinchilla again, it was as fierce as a little leopard. It was hostile to everyone, and when she went to tease it, she was almost scratched by its claws. Ji Xunyu felt that the chinchilla had mutated. Fortunately, the chinchilla was very docile to her sister, and followed her step by step, often acting cute and spoiled to her sister. Ji Xunyu thought that it was the chinchilla's habit to only be close to its owner. But it turned out that it was trained through this method. It seemed that she was also treated like a chinchilla by her sister. What about the chinchilla? Did it really die of illness? A chinchilla's lifespan was about 1,000 years. When she gave the chinchilla to her sister, it was still a kitten, and disappeared in less than 200 years. Later, when she went back and did not see the chinchilla, she casually asked Ji Tianyu. Ji Tianyu immediately burst into tears, saying that the chinchilla accidentally fell into the lake in the imperial garden and caught a cold. She called many imperial physicians to treat it, but they still could not cure it, and it died in the end. At that time, Ji Tianyu even took her hand to see the small grave for the chinchilla. In front of the small grave, Ji Tianyu cried again. Ji Xunyu couldn't bear to see her little sister cry, so she immediately promised to find an even cuter animal for her. Only then did her little sister stop crying. Later on, she found another cute pet, and gave it to her younger sister. Only then did this matter come to an end. That chinchilla didn't fall into the lake by accident. It was forced to drown in the lake by the princess. The one-armed maid finally told the truth. Ji Xunyu. Why? The one-armed maid said. Originally, the chinchilla was only close to the little princess, and the little princess also liked it very much. Later, the little princess recruited a new maid in the palace. The little handmaiden was nimble, smart, and lively. She was a good handmaiden, but she liked small animals very much, and she liked the chinchilla very much. She often secretly fed the chinchilla. Even if she was scratched by the chinchilla, she was not angry. She still gave the chinchilla a portion of delicious food. Later on, the chinchilla became closer to her. Occasionally, she would allow the little maid to hug her. Unfortunately, it was seen by the little princess once. The little princess was angry at that time. When the one-armed maid said this, her face was already faintly pale. Chapter 2876. At this point, the one-armed maid's face had already turned pale. When the chinchilla saw her, it tried to get into her arms, but she grabbed it by the neck and threw it to the ground. The chinchilla was injured and cried out miserably on the ground, but the little princess ignored it. Instead, she ordered the little maid who caused the trouble to kill the chinchilla herself. The little maid begged and kowtowed for the chinchilla until her forehead was bleeding, but the little princess refused to take back her order. She even threatened that if the little maid didn't carry out her order, she would send people to kill the little maid's whole family. The maid at the side continued. No matter how much the little maid cried, it was useless. She could only tremble and pick up the chinchilla. According to the little princess's orders, she drowned the chinchilla in the lake. She didn't drown it in one breath, but after it was almost submerged, she lifted it up and pressed it back into the water again after it caught its breath. Every time the chinchilla came out of the water, it would scream and scratch the little maid angrily. The little maid cried and let it scratch her until her face and hands were covered in blood. Ji Xunyu's anger boiled in her chest as she listened. What about the little maid? The one-armed maid closed her eyes. She's crazy. She went crazy not long after she drowned the chinchilla. Later, she also jumped into the lake. Before she died, she said that she wanted to accompany the chinchilla. The truth was so cruel. The little sister she had loved for hundreds of years was actually such a person. She was considered to be experienced and knowledgeable, and had seen a lot of human nature, but she didn't expect to be deceived by a child for so many years. She was so nice to her, and wanted to leave all the good things for her. She was actually the biggest ingrate. Ji Shenyu wanted to laugh. She had always thought that her eldest sister and second sister were scum, and her little sister was good. So she had always been harsh to her eldest sister and second sister. But to her little sister, she was as warm as spring. Only now did she understand that a dog that really bites doesn't bark. Ji Shenyu's eyes flashed coldly. It was fine if her little sister didn't provoke her in the future. But if she provoked her again, she would teach her a lesson. She would make her pay the price. What happened that day when she slashed you in anger? Didn't she leave with Rongyue Tianlan? Ji Shenyu thought of another question. The single-armed maid bowed and said, "The little princess indeed came out with Her Highness Rongyu. But Her Highness Rongyu's expression towards the little princess was very cold, and even said that she wanted to talk to the little princess." At that time, the little princess seemed unwilling. But Her Highness Rongyu said that if they didn't talk about it this time, they wouldn't talk about it in the future. The little princess followed him to the pavilion. No one knew what Her Highness Rongyu said to her, but she started crying. After that, Her Highness Rongyu left on her own, and the little princess began to cry and curse in the pavilion, attracting the attention of some commoners. We were afraid that she would bring down her status as a princess, so we went forward to persuade her to go back to the carriage. In the end, she vented her anger on us. Ji Shenyu frowned slightly. What did she curse and cry about? It seems that Her Highness Rongyu clearly told her to stop pestering him. She cried and scolded him, saying that she had done so much for him, but he didn't want her anymore. The single-armed maid roughly described the scene. When Rongyue Tianlan and Ji Tianyue were talking, they didn't dare to approach them, so they didn't know what they were talking about. He didn't want her anymore? Abandoned after using her? Ji Shenyu actually didn't know how far Rongyue Tianlan and Ji Tianyue had progressed. Chapter 2877. Ji Shenyu actually didn't know how far Rongyue Tianlan and Ji Tianyue had progressed, so this was her first reaction when she heard the two maids' words. Her Highness Rongyue and Ji Tianyue have made a promise to each other? Ji Shenyu's pretty face turned cold. If Rongyue Tianlan and Ji Tianyue had made a promise to each other, and then abandoned her, that would be too much of a scumbag. It was tantamount to playing with the feelings of both sisters in the palm of one's hand, and that was something she couldn't tolerate. The two maids shook their heads together. No. Her Highness Rongyue has been gentle and polite to her ever since she met her, and only took her out once on the Daughter's Day. She bought some children's toys for her. Ji Shenyu naturally knew about that time, when they were drinking and admiring the moon together on Admiring Moon Peak. Rongyue Tianlan and Ji Tianyue's interactions were more like a pair of children. After that, Third Princess left a letter saying that she wanted to break off the engagement with Her Highness Rongyue, and Her Highness Rongyue left the palace directly. Little Princess went to Misty Mountain under the escort of the guards. I was traveling with Little Princess at that time, and we didn't meet Her Highness Rongyue on the way. Little Princess deliberately made people misunderstand that Her Highness Rongyue was in the same carriage as her. After that, Third Princess and Her Highness Rongyue successfully broke off the engagement, and Her Highness Rongyue sent Little Princess back to the Nantiang clan. Her Highness Rongyue was outside the carriage the whole time, and other than a few words with Little Princess across the carriage, they didn't have any other interactions. Little Princess came alone to celebrate the Overlord's birthday this time, and only met Her Highness Rongyue at the banquet. The one-armed maid had been by Ji Tianyue's side all this time, so she knew the inside story, and said everything at this time. Ji Shenyu. It turned out that she had misunderstood Rongyue Tianlan. Rongyue Tianlan and Ji Tianyue didn't have a marriage promise, but Rongyue Tianlan was good to her for a while. But it didn't seem like the kind of good to a lover, more like spoiling a child. Ji Shenyu Tianlan thought too much, and all the trouble that followed was caused by her. She ruined her own reputation, and wanted to make it a reality. While she was lost in thought, another maid said, Her Highness Rongyue is good to Little Princess seems to be hiding something. I heard Little Princess confessing to Her Highness Rongyeld, saying that she wasn't afraid of being a substitute. She only wanted to be with Her Highness Rong. Substitute? A substitute. Rong Yu Tianlan was inexplicably good to Ji Tianyue. It turned out that it wasn't the kind of love at first sight, but that she was treating her as a substitute. Whose substitute did he think she was? His former lover. He had lived for such a long time, and his appearance was so distinguished and elegant, so it was understandable that he had a lover. She remembered that when he first came to Nantian Palace to cancel the engagement, one of the reasons was that his heart already belonged to someone else. At that time, she had thought that it was just a random reason he had come up with to break off the engagement. Now it seemed that it was true, since he used Ji Tianyue as a substitute for that woman. It could be inferred that the woman was already dead. From the looks of it now, Rong Yu Tianlan was actually an infatuated person who couldn't bear to part with her old friend. Pooh! A garland of flowers landed on the head of Ji Xinyu, who was in a daze, and a teasing voice rang out. Senior sister, what are you thinking about? Why are you so engrossed? Ji Xinyu finally regained her senses. She took off the garland on her head and casually threw it at Xie Fenglu, who was practically jumping around beside her. Brat, are you looking for death? Chapter 2878. She was dressed as a man this time, walking outside with Shen Yu's identity. Why did this brat put on a garland for her? People would think she was a sissy freak if they saw her. Xie Fenglu carried the personally woven garland and smiled mischievously. Senior sister, it's not bad for you to walk around as a princess. Why do you have to dress as a man? It's a pity to hide such a beautiful face under such a skin. It's more convenient to dress as a man. Ji Xinyu answered briefly. Only by dressing as a man could she drink big bowls of wine, eat big pieces of meat, and pique with others without any scruples. But as a princess, she had to keep her identity as a princess and always remember that she could not disgrace her identity. This had nothing to do with her face, but the dignity of a princess, the dignity of the Nantiang clan. She looked at the surrounding scenery and was a little puzzled. Why do we have to walk? Good question. Xie Fenglu smiled. Senior sister, after you let those two maids leave, you walked down the mountain by yourself and never flew. I thought you wanted to see the scenery of our mountain, so I followed you. Ji Xinyu almost rubbed her forehead. She was too distracted 2 days ago. Xie Fenglu told her that Hidden Sword Villa had made a new divine sword, and it was said that it had an unfathomable secret. Half a month later, Hidden Sword Villa would consecrate the divine sword and choose a master. He asked if she was interested. Hidden Sword Villa actually did not hide swords but cast them. The swords cast by Hidden Sword Villa were famous in the entire Fanning continent. It was said that it took 10 years to sharpen a sword, but Hidden Sword Villa only casts one sword every 500 years. Slow work produced fine work. So naturally, the swords cast were the best of the best. Every sword could make people fight over it. And the sword cast this time was even more different. It was said that the most famous swordsmith of Hidden Sword Villa accidentally found a piece of flying iron, and then spent 1,500 years to cast it. Probably because the sword cast this time was really a divine sword. After it was formed, it could not be sharpened. In the end, the swordsmith directly jumped into the furnace and sacrificed himself to the sword. And the sword was truly cast. It was said that on the day of success, the whole villa was covered in red light, and the auspicious signs rushed into the sky. In short, all kinds of strange things were said to be miraculous. This kind of sword was basically sentient. Once such a sword recognized its master, it would never betray its master for the rest of its life. Therefore, every time the Hidden Sword Villa forged a divine weapon, they would publicly search for a master for the divine weapon. Ji Xinyu was naturally interested in such a sword, so she packed up and wanted to go to the sword forging villa. However, she bumped into the two maids at the door. Senior sister, this is the first time I've seen you so lost in thought. What are you thinking about? Xie Fenglu looked at her with a smile, but there was a hint of sharpness in his eyes. Ji Xinyu ignored his question. She seemed to have thought of something. Old Nine, you can go to the Hidden Sword Manor first. I need to go back to the Nantian Palace. Xie Fenglu was stunned. Go home to visit your family? I'll go with you. No need. 10 days later, we'll meet again in the Hidden Sword Manor. Ji Xinyu flatly refused. She leapt up into the air and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Xie Fenglu was still holding the garland. The building was heavy, and the crescent moon was like a hook. Ji Xinyu was dressed in a green robe, sitting on a dark green tortoiseshell roof, almost blending into the darkness of the night. She held a wine gourd in her left hand and glanced down the hall. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. 8 days, in 8 days, she had already found out the ins and outs of the matter. Chapter 2879. Most of what the two maids said was true, such as the relationship between Rongyue Tianlan and Ji Tianyue, and the Totoro incident. But the so-called rumors around her were all spread by Ji Tianyue. So these things were exaggerated and had to be discounted. Before Ji Tianyue met Rongyue Tianlan, she didn't deliberately create rumors about her sister to slander her. Perhaps she occasionally mentioned it, but it was unintentional. Until Ji Tianyue met Rongyue Tianlan and fell in love with her at first sight. She felt that her third sister was a stumbling block in her pursuit of her husband. Only then did she consciously create rumors, and it became more and more intense. And now, Ji Tianyue was locked in this deep courtyard. She had fallen out of favor. Ji Tianyue came back 9 days ago under the escort of the secret guards. When she came back, she cried to the South Heaven Emperor, complaining that her third sister was helping an outsider, and taught her a lesson in public. The South Heaven Emperor wasn't someone who was easy to fool. He summoned the secret guards, and finally understood the whole truth. He was so angry that his face turned ashen. Even if the princess of a clan was at a disadvantage, she should remain calm and think of ways to salvage the situation, instead of crying and making a scene like a shrew and making a fool of herself. He never knew that his youngest daughter would grow up to be like this, which made him extremely disappointed. He was even more disappointed than when he heard the rumors about his third daughter. His third daughter was rumored to be so unpleasant, not because of herself, but because of many external factors. And this youngest daughter completely did it on her own. And from the description of the guards, he vaguely guessed that Rongyue Tianlan had completely lost interest in Ji Tianyue. He was destined to lose this son-in-law. If he had known, he wouldn't have helped his youngest daughter to force his third daughter to break off the engagement. So much so that the chicken flies away and the eggs are broken. They have truly suffered a double loss. The South Heaven Emperor was regretful and angry. If he looked at his youngest daughter again, she would be repulsive. The love of an emperor for his children was originally not pure. It was mixed with countless politics, and his heart was much colder than ordinary people. So Ji Tianyue's crying complaints not only didn't receive the emperor's pity, but also received a real punishment. She was locked in the cold palace. Without the South Heaven Emperor's orders, no one was allowed to let her out. Those who disobeyed would be beheaded. When Ji Xinyu arrived, Ji Tianyue had been locked in the cold palace for a whole day. That was the real cold palace. The palace was dilapidated, and weeds were overgrown in the courtyard. There were broken tables and chairs in the palace, and there was only a thin blanket on the wooden bed. She no longer had anyone by her side to serve her, and even her 3 meals were no longer timely. Compared to her previous extravagant lifestyle, it was like heaven and earth. The little girl probably couldn't figure it out. For the past few days, she had been crying and making a scene in the cold palace, refusing to eat in a fit of pique, and so on. She screamed until her throat was hoarse, but her father didn't even look at her with pity. In the past 2 days, she probably realized that she had really fallen out of favor. Once her father, who doted on her the most, hardened his heart, her original magic weapon was completely useless. In the past 2 days, she seemed to have accepted her fate. She no longer cried loudly, and was willing to eat. It was just that the food she ate was nothing but plain soup. It was so vegetarian that she found it hard to swallow. Ji Xinyu had already investigated everything in the past few days. At this moment, she was sitting on the roof of the palace, listening to the little girl's occasional sobbing and sleep-talking. Her pretty face was expressionless. Ji Xinyu came to the South Heaven Palace in stealth. She didn't show her face, So the people in the South Heaven Palace didn't know of her arrival. 3 days ago, she received a sound transmission from the South Heaven Emperor. The South Heaven Emperor's voice was very loving. Chapter 2880. 3 days ago, she received a transmission from the South Heaven Emperor. The South Heaven Emperor's voice in the transmission talisman was very affectionate. He looked forward to her return home, and said that her imperial mother missed her very much. He also said that he had received her letter, and had made proper arrangements for the families of the 2 maids. He also taught Ji Tianyue a lesson. He said that he owed her too much these past few years, and asked her to return home. He also said that it was not right for a princess of a clan to keep floating outside. He also renovated her palace and bought her mini dolls. Ji Xinyu used to yearn for these favors, but now she felt completely cold inside. The love a monarch had for his children was not much different from the love he had for his concubines. It was also filled with calculations and gains and losses. Perhaps this was the norm for the royal family, but she could not get used to it. She did not fit in with the royal family, so she flatly rejected her father's invitation and closed the message talisman. Everything had been investigated clearly. She would not easily return to the inner court of the palace in the future. As for her mother, her father had been treating her well recently, so she did not need to worry. It was already late at night. She was about to get up when a sleep-talking voice came from the palace. "Big sister, third sister." It was followed by soft sobs. Ji Xinyu paused and lowered her eyes. In the past 2 days, Ji Tianyue had often unconsciously called out to her when she was asleep, followed by crying. In the past, Ji Xinyu could not bear to see her being wronged. They were nearly 3,000 years apart. If Ji Xinyu had married early, her daughter would have grown up to this age. So her feelings for Ji Tianyue were actually very complicated. The eldest sister was like a mother, but also like a mother. Every time she came back, she would give the little girl the greatest care. But she did not expect her to be an ingrate. Now, the little girl's crying could no longer move her. However, she was still a little girl that she had loved for hundreds of years. Even though she had seen through her true colors and completely let go of her, she still felt a little upset. Ji Xinyu paused for a moment and smiled. It was unknown whether it was mockery or sarcasm. She turned around and disappeared. In people's impression, the place where a sword was forged must be a fiery place, because the forging of a sword required extremely hot fire. Some even said that the sword forged from magma was the sharpest. However, the hidden sword villa was built on top of a snowy mountain with a 10,000-year-old glacier, Snow Dragon Mountain. This mountain was extremely steep, reaching straight into the clouds. If you want to go up this mountain, you can't walk. You can only fly. Therefore, even if the people of Hidden Sword Manor were just maids sweeping the floor, they would still have extremely high flying skills. The Hidden Sword Villa was usually extremely mysterious. The mountain gate would not open once in 100 years. There was a barrier on the mountain. When the mountain gate was closed, no one could go up. Therefore, the Hidden Sword Manor was usually a secluded paradise. Outsiders only heard of its name and rarely saw it. According to the master of the Hidden Sword Villa, this was the only way the people in the villa could focus on forging swords and not be disturbed by external affairs. Only when the divine sword chose its master would the gates of the Hidden Sword Manor be open for a day. On that day, as long as the divine sword had the corresponding skills, they could enter the mountain gates to seek the divine sword. The divine sword would choose its master on that day, and then everyone would be thrown down the mountain together, and the gates of the manor would be closed again. Of course, the Hidden Sword Villa was not a fool. They would give away a treasured sword that they had painstakingly refined for hundreds, or even thousands of years. After the divine sword chose its master, the sword master would have to pay a certain price in exchange. Chapter 2881. The price could be big or small, and there were all kinds of methods. Some used secret techniques to exchange for it, some used magic treasures to exchange for it, and some used enough gold, silver, and jewels to exchange for it. After all, such a big hidden sword villa needed to eat. Of course, It wasn't like he hadn't met those poor sword masters, who needed to do something for the villa in exchange. No matter what, the divine sword didn't choose a master based on wealth or poverty. As long as one was fated and had the ability, anyone could be chosen as the master of the divine sword. Because the hidden sword villa was only open for one day, and it was built on the extremely remote Snow Dragon Mountain, everyone would come early to fight for this opportunity. Some of the more impatient ones even came a few days early. In order to accommodate these people, the hidden sword villa specially built an inn at the foot of the mountain. Because this inn was only used once every few hundred years, it was the kind of inn that didn't open for 100 years and ate for 1,000 years. The price of the room was very expensive, and the facilities were not very good. There were only a dozen or so single rooms, and a night's stay cost 1,000 taels of gold. The others were all large bunks. Each person would need 50 taels of gold to stay a night. Even so, the inn was still packed with people, especially the single rooms, which were fought over by many rich people. They had all booked them a few days in advance. Those who could go up the mountain were not incompetent people. Money was like dirt in their eyes, so most people could still afford the accommodation fee. As for those who couldn't afford it, they could only stay in the big trees outside the inn, in the shacks, or in the straw huts. Ji Xinyu had asked Xie Fenglu to go a few days in advance, so that he could book 2 single rooms. Although she was dressed as a man, she still didn't want to sleep with a group of men. She thought that since Xie Fenglu had arrived 10 days early, he would definitely be able to book a good single room. She didn't expect to find out after meeting him that the single rooms had all been booked. Some people even went half a month in advance. When Xie Fenglu arrived, there was only 1 room left. This was because he was fast enough to snatch it. If he was a quarter of an hour later, he wouldn't even be able to keep that room. Ji Xinyu looked at Xie Fenglu's apologetic face and felt a headache coming on. She began to wonder if she should let Xie Fenglu stay in the large bunk and take the single room for herself. She looked around the inn. This inn provided food and accommodation, so the hall of the inn was not small. It was also dinner time, so there were many people in the hall, and most of them were in pairs. Ji Xinyu was confused. Because there were not many women who practiced martial arts on this continent, and the swords produced by the hidden sword villa were all majestic and vigorous. Most of the people who came here to ask for a sword were heroes from all walks of life. There were almost no women. The number of women who came this time could only be described as dazzling. There were more than a dozen of them in the hall, fat and thin, pink and green, and they were all stunning beauties. Most of these women had a man by their side, and they seemed to be the man's family or lover. Of course, there were also some who were not lovers of other families. They were surrounded by 4 or 5 men who were attentive to them. Ji Xinyu and Xie Fenglu sat down at a table. After looking around, they asked, "Why are there so many women here?" Xie Fenglu poured her a cup of wine. "Brother Shen, you probably don't know, but this time, the 1,000-year divine sword that the hidden sword villa wants to recognize as its master is a female sword." Because in front of others, Xie Fenglu automatically called her brother Shen. "Female sword? So there's also a male sword?" Ji Xinyu raised her eyebrows. She knew that swords were divided into male and female. Chapter 2882. She knew that swords were divided into male and female, but it usually referred to the Mandarin duck swords. A long and wide sword was the male sword, while a sharp and thin sword was the female sword. The appearance and style of the sword were all the same. Xie Fenglu shook his head. "I don't know. I only know that the divine sword this time is called the Plain Maiden Sword by the Hidden Sword Manor. It's for women. That's why these people brought their family members who are good at martial arts here. There are also some famous female immortals who travel alone in the martial arts world." Xie Fenglu pouted at one of the tables. "Do you see that? That's the Plain Maiden Yu Shueshang." She had taken the second room in the inn. That room was specially reserved for her by immortal monarch Lu Hui. Ji Xinyu had heard of Yu Shueshang. She was born in a humble family, but she was very beautiful. She also learned a lot of skills in a big sect, and her martial arts had reached the level of an immortal. She was cold and arrogant, and was called the #1 ice beauty in the martial arts world. Ji Xunyue had only heard of her before, but this was the first time she saw her in person. Yu Xueshang sat there in a white dress. Her skin was as white as snow, and her eyes were full of spirit. Her every move was like the wind returning to the snow. She was indeed an ice beauty. Her pretty face was always tense, as cold as ice. Sitting across from her was a man in luxurious robes. He was none other than Lu Hui, immortal monarch, who was known as the richest young master in the Sanyin continent. Lu Hui immortal's martial arts were not peerless, but he had a good father. It was said that the Lu family was even richer than the 4 emperors. So Lu Hui immortal was very extravagant. Wherever he went, he was like a child of wealth. His favorite saying was, "This young master will pay for all the food in this restaurant. Everyone eat as much as you want." Thus, he was very popular wherever he went. He had a lot of friends around him, and there were also a lot of women around him. According to Xie Fenglu, the pioneer of gossip, Lu Hui, immortal monarch, had originally brought along a charming female companion and wanted to fight for that sword for her. After booking the room, he accidentally saw Yu Xueshang. He was shocked and immediately drove away the female companion he had been doting on. He began to fawn on Yu Xueshang, and even gave his room to her. This was why the single rooms were full so many days in advance. He had brought his family, and there were many women. Naturally, all of them wanted a single room. The Hidden Sword Manor had probably expected this situation, so they changed the main hall, which originally only allowed people to sleep on the bunk beds, into small rooms that looked like pigeon cages, for the women who came late and did not book a single room. Even these small rooms were not cheap, and each one cost 100 taels of gold. Fortunately, these women's appearances were pretty, and some of the male heroes who wanted to curry favor with them paid for them. Xie Fenglu briefly explained the situation and chuckled. "Senior sister, if you reveal your true appearance, there will probably be a lot of people who will want to give their single rooms to you. These women won't have anything to do with you." Ji Xinyu glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. "I think that if you dress up as a woman, you'll also be a great beauty. There will also be people who will give you a single room, so you don't have to sleep in a shared bed, right?" Xie Fenglu. He blinked and looked like he was about to cry. "Brother Shin, you and I are brothers. I specially booked this single room, and even added a bed. At night, we brothers can talk by candlelight. You actually want to drive me out to sleep? How can you bear to do this?" Chapter 2883. Although his voice was not loud, the people at the next table were all experts among experts, so they naturally heard him clearly. Countless pairs of eyes looked towards Ji Xinyu and Xie Fenglu's table. Ji Xinyu and Xie Fenglu were both dressed in men's clothing, and their appearances were both handsome and outstanding. Xie Fenglu's baby face was especially likable. The two of them sat there like pearls and jade, reflecting each other's brilliance. Although Shen Yu and Xie Fenglu were very famous in this continent, there were not many who really knew them. After all, one of them was often in the Purple Cloud sect, while the other kept a low profile. In the end, there were still 2 people present who recognized them. These 2 people were originally talking in a low voice, but when they heard the commotion, they looked over. One person's eyes lit up as he called out, "Brother Shen." He walked over with large strides and sat down beside Ji Xinyu. His wolf claw touched her shoulder. "Brother Shen, I've finally found you." The veins on Ji Xinyu's forehead jumped 3 times in joy. This person was none other than Rongyue Tianheng. The other person also walked over and cupped his fists towards Xie Fenglu. "Young Master Xie, what a coincidence we meet again." This person's face was like jade, and his eyes were like bright stars. He was actually a handsome man. Ji Xinyu did not know this person, but she knew that he was an old acquaintance of Xie Fenglu. He raised the wine cup in his hand, just in time to block Rongyue Tianheng's wolf claw. "Tianheng, it's rare for us to meet, let's have a drink." Rongyue Tianheng had always accepted Xinyu's wine, and immediately gulped down a cup. The 2 of them took advantage of the situation, and sat down at their table. The handsome young master sat down beside Xie Fenglu, but Xie Fenglu obviously did not welcome him. What are you doing here? The young master smiled slightly. Of course I'm here for the divine sword. Xie Fenglu raised his eyebrows. That's a female sword. Could it be that young Master Huang also has a girl he likes? Young Master Huang stroked a bamboo flute in his hand, smiled, and raised the wine cup in front of him. Come, let's have a drink together. Ji Xinyu asked Rongyue Tianheng. You also came for the divine sword? You have a girl you like? Rongyue Tianheng's handsome face actually turned red, and he nodded. Ji Xinyu was surprised. She smiled and said, It's rare for a playboy like you to finally have a girl you like. Come tell me, which family's daughter is she? Rongyue Tianheng was once again bashful. This is the third princess of the Nantiang clan. The wine cup in Ji Xinyu's hand almost fell to the ground. What? Xie Fenglio's eyes also narrowed, and he quietly moved closer to Ji Xinyu. Ji Xinyu felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She couldn't help but ask, Did you take the wrong medicine? Weren't you afraid of being involved with her a while ago? You were so scared that you didn't dare to go home and drink outside? Why is she the one you like now? Rongyue Tianheng sighed and said, Originally, I believed the rumors and thought that she was. Actually, she is very good, very good. I fell in love with her at first sight during Sect Master Ziyun's banquet. I want to propose to her and give her a gift. If I can get this divine sword and give it to her, maybe she will be moved. Ji Xinyu. Xie Fenglu narrowed his eyes and smiled. Don't even think about it, my senior sister won't like you. Rongyue Tianheng was like an obedient little brother in front of Ji Xinyu, but he was still very arrogant to outsiders. So he glanced at Xie Fenglu and said coldly, How would you know if you don't try? Chapter 2884. Xie Fenglu swirled his wine cup. Of course I know my senior sister's personality. If I say she won't like you, then she won't like you. Isn't that right, Brother Shen? The last sentence was directed at Ji Xinyu. Ji Xinyu, on the other hand, felt that her junior brother was being a little overbearing today. She smiled and swirled her wine cup. Are you here today to discuss swords or women? That one sentence left everyone speechless. That young Master Huang raised his wine cup towards Ji Xinyu. Brother Shen, and this humble one think alike. Come, let's toast you. The previous argument passed just like that. The four of them discussed the Jianghu anecdotes and the use of the female sword. Rongyue Huan couldn't help but ask, since there is a female sword, then shouldn't there be a male sword? If he obtained the male sword and went to ask for the female sword for his beloved, then it would be a marriage destined by the heavens. That young Master Huang knew a lot about the inside story. He shook his head. That might not be the case. The so-called female sword was not a name given to them, because they were a pair. According to the people in the villa, that piece of meteoric iron is very suitable to make a female sword. The master swordsmith once wanted to make it into a normal sword, but he couldn't succeed, so that's how it is. Ji Xinyu was finally relieved. She did want to obtain this divine sword, but if the male sword fell into the hands of a man, then wouldn't she be unintentionally paired with that man? She didn't want that. Since it was a single sword, then it didn't matter. She was determined to obtain this sword. Just as she was thinking about this, Rongyue Huan suddenly patted her shoulder. Brother Shen, I'm not late. I booked a good room. Why don't you sleep in my room tonight? We brothers haven't talked in a long time, we can chat. Before Ji Xinyu could say anything, Xie Fenglu exploded. Absolutely not. Brother Shen came with me, she can sleep in my room. My room is good, it's sunny. This young master's room is good, it's bigger than yours. Your room is too cramped. My room isn't cramped. It's more than enough for 2 big beds. If you don't believe me, ask Brother Huang. He's sharing a room with me now. Haha, there are already 2 people in your room, and now you're asking Brother Shen to go over. Are you planning to squeeze in with the 3 of you? Or are you trying to chase Brother Shen out? Young Marquis, you're being too unkind. Young Master Huang had a good temper. He looked at Xie Fenglu and smiled, trying to smooth things over. That doesn't matter. I can squeeze with Brother Xie. This young Marquis is indeed very loyal to Brother Shen. These past few days, he has often been talking about how loyal Brother Shen is. Every time he opens his mouth, he would say Brother Shin. It can be seen that their relationship is really good. Why don't we let the young Duke and young Master Shin share a room and get to know each other better? Xie Fenglio's handsome face darkened, and he slammed his wine glass on the table. No. Master Huang, Rongyue and Tian Heng raised their eyebrows. Why not? Xie Fengliu opened his mouth, and just as he was about to come up with another reason, Ji Xinyu, who was at the side, lightly put down the wine cup and smiled. I am very touched by your enthusiasm, Tianheng. It's rare for you to have this kind of heart. I am very happy. However, you've known me for a long time, so you should know that I have a bad habit. No matter where I go, I like to sleep alone. I'm not used to sleeping with others. Chapter 2885. Since there are 2 big beds in Tianheng's room, there should be no problem for 3 people to sleep in. Fengliu, you can go and squeeze with them. Rongyushenheng. Young Master Huang. Xie Fengliu. Rongyushenheng looked at Xie Fengliu with disdain. 2 people can sleep in my room, but 3 people is too crowded. Xie Fengliu also snorted. I won't sleep in the same bed as 2 stinky men. Brother Shin, let's share a room. Ji Xinyu frowned slightly. Rongyushenheng and that young Master Huang didn't know her background. It was fine if they made such a request, but why did Xie Fengliu want to join in the fun? There was something wrong with this kid recently. Just as they were arguing incessantly, the owner of the inn suddenly walked over and bowed towards Ji Xinyu. Is it young Master Xinyu? The entire hall suddenly became quiet. Everyone who came here knew that the owner of the inn was more arrogant than the sky. No matter who he saw, he would ignore them. Even if a prince or a prince came, he would ignore them. Even the waiters here were extremely arrogant and didn't know how to greet the guests. No matter who came, they would ask for a room according to the order and serve the food according to the order. They would never take the initiative to greet the guests. As for the owner of the inn, he was a mysterious figure who showed his face but not his tail. No matter how awesome the guests were, they would have to nod and greet him. However, he always ignored them. If he could even snort, it would be considered giving the other party face. Such a person actually came to talk to Ji Xinyu directly, and even bowed to greet her. This was even more shocking than seeing Mars colliding with Earth. Everyone in the hall opened their eyes wide and looked at the table. Xinyu's reputation in the Fanning continent was very famous. Even if the people here hadn't seen him, they had heard of him. However, no matter how famous he was, he couldn't be more famous than the 4 emperors, right? When the 4 emperors came here to stay, the owner of the inn didn't even greet them. What was going on today? Did the sun rise from the south? Ji Xinyu suddenly became the focus of the hall. She was also a little surprised and nodded slightly. That's me. Is something the matter, shopkeeper Fang? Manager Fang smiled faintly and handed over a bunch of keys to her. Young Master Shen. Someone has already booked the sky room number 1 for young Master Shen. This humble one has been waiting for young Master Shen for more than 10 days. Today, the wait has finally come. Ji Xinyu. Everyone's mouths formed an O shape. Everyone knew that the number 1 room in this inn was a legend, and it was never reserved for the public. It didn't matter how much money they offered, or how early they came. Even if the 4 emperors came, they could only stay in the sky room number 2 at most. But now, room 1 was open to the public. Furthermore, it had already been booked. Who was the person who booked the room? Can this inn make an exception? Ji Xinyu was also a little confused. She did not take the keys. Who booked the room? The innkeeper smiled again. This inn never divulges the information of our guests. Of course, the person who booked the room also said that if young Master Shen is unwilling, he won't force you. How could he not be willing? Although this kind of pie falling from the sky was most likely a trap, Ji Xinyu had always been bold, so she wasn't afraid of any traps. Besides, she really did need this room. The ivory bed was covered with soft shark silk, and the bed curtain was light green like the color of the sky. Chapter 2886. The ivory bed was covered with soft shark silk. The bed canopy was light green like the color of the sky. The warm jade floor. the antique furniture made of unknown materials. These were the furnishings of the Sky Room 1. The room was very clean, and the air was very fresh. Sitting in this kind of room was like sitting in nature. But everyone knew that this inn was built on the peak of a snowy mountain. The outside was covered with ice, and every night, the north wind would blow, snow would fill the sky, and a drop of water would turn into ice. If it wasn't so cold, everyone wouldn't have tried so hard to squeeze into the inn. They were willing to be slaughtered here. The furnishings of the other rooms in the inn were almost the same. Ordinary bed, ordinary furniture, ordinary floor. The only difference was the size and whether there was a window or not. But this Sky Room 1's furnishings were different from any other room. It was even more high-end than the palaces of the princes and princesses in the palace. Xie Fenglu had been wandering around the room, looking for possible mechanisms or something like that. However, after walking around for a full hour, he was ultimately disappointed. Other than the luxurious room, there really weren't any hidden traps. Ji Xin, you didn't have to worry about someone suddenly crawling out of nowhere. Go back, there's nothing strange about this room. Ji Xinyu was dizzy from his wandering, and began to chase him away. Senior sister, I still feel that something is strange. Think about it. One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. The person who booked the room didn't even dare to reveal his identity. There must be some shady conspiracy. I still feel that this room is not suitable. Why can't I? We can stay in any room. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I won't lose out. It's getting late. You should go back to your room and rest. Ji Xinyu yawned. She hadn't rested well these past few days, so she was indeed tired. Besides, she had secretly checked the room. There really wasn't anything strange. Even if there was something strange, she wasn't afraid. Xie Fenglu still wanted to say something, but Ji Xinyu was already impatient. She directly threw him out. Be good, go back to sleep. The door closed with a clang, directly shutting Xie Fenglu out. Xie Fenglu. He looked at the room door that could only be opened with a key, and paused. He didn't believe that there wasn't something fishy going on. He didn't believe that there was such a person who didn't ask for anything in return, and hid his identity to treat his senior sister well. There must be some conspiracy. He thought for a moment, and sat down not far from the door. He wanted to stay here, and see what was going on. If senior sister was in danger, he would be able to save her in time. This heaven room number 1 was on its own floor. Even if it was in the corridor, it was better than the one outside. However, it was obvious that Xie Fenglu was overthinking things. He had been standing guard here for an hour, but he did not hear anything from the room. That room was so luxurious, and the soundproofing was excellent. Even if there was any movement inside, it probably wouldn't be heard, right? Xie Fenglu was worried again. He was about to knock on the door when light footsteps came from the stairs. His heart stirred and his figure flashed. He hid in a shadow and looked outside. Sure enough, 2 people walked up the stairs. However, Xie Fenglu was a little surprised to see them. It was Yu Xueshang and Lu Hui, Immortal Monarch. Even in the cold weather, Lu Hui, Immortal Monarch, was still waving a folding fan, carefully fanning away the dust on Yu Xueshang's dress. Chapter 2887. Lu Hui deity was still waving his fan in the cold weather, carefully fanning the dust off Yu Xueshang's dress. Xueshang, don't worry. It's fine if this room isn't open to the public, but since it's open to the public, I'll definitely get this room for you. You're the only one in this world who deserves to live in a room like this. Yu Xueshang was indeed worthy of being called the Ice Snow Fairy. Her beautiful face was still cold as she nodded slightly and finally opened her mouth, but it was only 2 words. Thank you. Xie Fenglu raised his eyebrows high, crossed his arms, and looked at her coldly. Although he felt that his senior sister's room was not very reliable, and he wanted nothing more than to persuade his senior sister to move into his room, it did not mean that he felt that his senior sister did not deserve to live in this room. If there was a woman in this world who was suitable to live in this room, it would only be his senior sister. As for the others, haha, this fairy Xueshang was not even worthy of carrying his senior sister's shoes. Luhui deity was probably really mesmerized by her beauty, as he directly knocked on Ji Xinyue's door. Ji Xinyue had also checked the entire room, and did not find anything wrong. She even found a very magical place. The spiritual energy in this room was much more abundant than outside. It was very nourishing. She had been running around for the past few days, and was actually very tired. But after staying in there for less than 2 hours, she felt much more relaxed. It was even better than sitting for 2 hours. She naturally would not let go of such an opportunity. She wanted to have a good night's rest, so that it would be convenient for her to go to the Sword Mountain Manor tomorrow. She had just meditated for less than a quarter of an hour, when there was a knock on the door. She frowned. "Who is it?" Luhui deity immediately said, "Deity Shen, it's me Luhui deity. Please open the door. This immortal monarch has something to discuss with divine monarch." Why was this prodigal deity looking for her? Ji Xinyue was still a little puzzled. She knew that this deity had a very clingy habit. If she did not talk to him, he would probably keep harassing her outside the door. Ji Xinyue opened the door, and leaned against the door frame, looking at the two people in front of her. What's the matter? Although she left the door open, there was a screen painted with mountains and rivers. Therefore, although the two of them took the opportunity to look inside, they couldn't see what was inside. He only felt that this screen was very quaint and valuable, and the air in the room was extraordinarily fresh. Yu Xueshang's eyes lit up. Her eyes were filled with envy as she looked at the room. Lu Hui, immortal monarch, also took the opportunity to explain the purpose of her visit. Shen Yu, who was disguised by Ji Xinyue, was one of the top figures in the Fanning continent. Therefore, Le Club Immortal Monarch didn't dare to be rash and spoke tactfully. They simply said that the snow-clad fairy was not very comfortable staying in the Sky Room number 2. They had originally wanted to book the Sky Room number 1. But they did not expect that it had already been booked by someone else. They had been waiting for the original owner to come, and only today did a guest arrive. So they wanted to switch rooms with Ji Xinyu. They also said that they were all men, so it did not matter which room they stayed in. They should take care of the woman, and make her stay more comfortable. A woman like Yu Xueshang should live in the best place. Of course, what Lu Hui, immortal monarch, lacked the least was money. He proposed to give Ji Xinyu double the room price. His words seemed to praise Yu Xueshang to the heavens, as if Ji Xinyu did not agree to the exchange, she would not have any tender feelings for the fairer sex, and would be unforgivable. Chapter 2888. Lu Hui, immortal master, finished his long speech, and waited for Ji Xinyue's reply. Yu Xueshang also looked at Ji Xinyue and said, "Immortal master Shen, it's not that Xueshang is delicate, it's just that Xueshang hasn't been feeling well these past few days, and the bed in Xueshang's room is a bit hard, making Xueshang even more uncomfortable. That's why Xueshang wants to change rooms. I'm sure Immortal Master won't reject Xueshang's small request, right?" She was indeed beautiful, especially when she was begging so pitifully. Most men would agree to her request when they saw her expression. Ji Xinyue crossed her arms and raised her eyebrows. "Is this what you two came here to talk about?" Both of them nodded. Ji Xinyue said indifferently, "If you're done, go wash up and sleep. Forgive me for not keeping you company." She turned around and entered the room, closing the door without hesitation. Lu Hui, immortal master. His nose almost hit the door, and he stared at the door with his mouth agape. It was also the first time Yu Xueshang was rejected like this. She was stunned for a moment, and after a while her snow-white face flushed red. With her beauty, she was practically invincible among men. Almost all of them flocked to her, and obeyed her every word. She thought that changing rooms would be a piece of cake, but she didn't expect. Lu Hui, immortal master, didn't give up and shouted outside, increasing the price by 3 times, 4 times, all the way to 10 times. He didn't get a response from Ji Xinyue, so he made up his mind, and was about to knock on the door again. A shadow flashed and directly attacked Lu Hui, immortal master's wrist. Lu Hui, immortal master, was shocked, and retracted his hand, looking back in the direction of the shadow. He saw Xie Fenglu leaning against the wall, twirling a small knife in his hand, and looking at them with a faint smile. If you dare to make a fuss here again, the knife in my hand will slit your throat. Do you believe me? Lu Hui, immortal master. Yu Xueshang's pretty face turned green and white. Although Lu Hui, immortal master, was a rich immortal master, his martial arts were just average. If he really fought with Xie Fenglu, he had no chance of winning. Although Yu Xueshang had a good reputation on the continent, her kung fu was only slightly better than most women. At most, she was slightly better than Lu Hui deity. If she really fought with Xie Fenglu, she had no chance of winning. She didn't expect that there would be two men who didn't treat her like a pot of vinegar today. Although she felt indignant, there was nothing she could do. She bitterly pursed her lips and pretended to be magnanimous. Forget it. Since Divine Lord Shun is unwilling, then there's no need to force it. She turned around and walked down the stairs. Lu Hui, immortal monarch, also glared at Xie Fenglu, then turned around and left. Ji Xinyu also thought that something was going to happen tonight, but after a night had passed, when she woke up, the room was still quiet, and nothing had happened. Of course, the person who booked the room for her never showed up. Recently, she had been risking her life a little more. After getting injured a few times, she had not fully recovered, and had been busy with other things. Therefore, her skills had always been in a half-assed state. But after sleeping here for a night, she actually felt refreshed, as if she had meditated for a year. Almost all of his power had been restored. Not only was there no trap in this room, but it was also a rare paradise. More importantly, Ji Xinyu searched the room again and again, but she couldn't find where the abundant spiritual qi in the room came from. It was very easy for her to freshen up now. A cleansing spell could solve the problem. Chapter 2889. She woke up very early, and was shocked when she opened the door. Xie Fenglu was sitting by the door, leaning against it and sleeping. When she opened the door, this guy fell in. Fortunately, this guy immediately woke up and jumped up. He rubbed his eyes and looked at Ji Xinyu from head to toe. Are you okay? This guy probably didn't sleep well. His hair was messy, and he looked like he had just woken up. Ji Xinyu looked at him in surprise. You've been sleeping here? Xie Fenglu's baby face blushed slightly, but his eyes rippled as he looked at Ji Xinyu. He nodded heavily. Yes. She must know that he chose to stay here, because he was worried about her. She must be touched. Ji Xinyu looked at the long carpet in the corridor, and then looked at him. She suddenly understood. Your room is so bad, it's not as comfortable as this corridor? Xie Fenglu was speechless. Puffed. Someone laughed. Xie Fenglu turned around angrily, and saw that young Master Huang was standing there, smiling at him. Ji Xinyu knew that this young Master Huang had a very poetic name, Huang Qinglu. This person was unknown in the Fanning continent, and Ji Xin, you had never heard of his name. This person looked gentle and elegant, and was very low-key. There didn't seem to be anything special about him. But Ji Xinyu knew that this person was extraordinary. The men who could come to this snowy mountain were not bad at martial arts. Even most of the women were very famous in the Jianghu. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the confidence to get the divine sword. Which one of the men who stayed in this inn wasn't a famous character? But this Huang Qinglu seemed to have popped out of the ground. He didn't have a name, but he easily came here. Ji Xinyu could be considered to have a good eye for people. Normally, when a person passed by her, she would be able to roughly guess how deep their martial arts were. But she couldn't see through Huang Qinglu. She couldn't even tell if he had martial arts. This kind of person either didn't have any martial arts, or was unfathomable. Ji Xinyu felt that the latter was more likely. After all, they had drunk together before. Ji Xinyu nodded at him, and went downstairs. What are you laughing at? Xie Fenglu looked at Huang Qinglu coldly. Huang Qinglu raised his eyebrows and his eyes flashed with interest. I can't laugh? Do you want me to cry when I see this scene? Xie Fenglu glanced at him again, and said in an even colder voice. Don't even think about hitting on her. She's my bottom line. Huang Qinglu leaned against the wall. There was still a smile on his handsome face, but his eyes were faintly cold. Do you really like her? Xie Fenglu lifted his foot and walked down, leaving behind a sentence. You're meddling too much. Whether I like her, or not has nothing to do with you. Also, don't show up in places where you shouldn't be. In the blink of an eye, he went downstairs as well. Huang Qingliu's slender white jade-like hand twirled the bamboo flute, looking at his back thoughtfully. Today was the day the immortal sword chose its master. The innkeeper brought everyone to the foot of the mountain. The peak was tens of thousands of feet high, covered by clouds and fog, making it impossible to see the peak. Although it was called a mountain, it was actually an ice mountain. The entire mountain seemed to have been polished out of ice and snow. The ice wall was so bright that it could be used as a mirror. The innkeeper cast a spell with his fingertips. A moment later he pointed upwards. A muffled sound came from the peak of the mountain. The clouds above slowly dispersed, turning into white cloud-like stairs that hung straight down. The innkeeper gestured to the crowd. Everyone please. Chapter 2890. Just as everyone was about to rush forward, the innkeeper said, because it's a female sword this time, the master selection is slightly different from the previous years, and it's also a bit more difficult. These white cloud steps are the first checkpoint. The white cloud steps look soft, but they're actually hard. Only those who can sense the divine sword summoning will be able to step on these steps. Those who can't sense it will step on air and fall down. Those who fall down are not fated with the divine sword and can directly leave the mountain. Everyone agreed, their hearts filled with apprehension. Originally, regardless of whether they were fated with the divine sword or not, they could enter the hidden sword villa to see the divine sword's glory. This time, they were actually allowed to sense the divine sword summoning first. This time it was a female sword, so the one who could sense it should be a woman, right? Could a man sense it? Xie Fenglu stood close to Ji Xinyu and sent a sound transmission to her. Senior sister, do you want to restore your original body to pass this stage? What if the divine sword really only summons women and is confused by your body's illusion? Ji Xinyu rubbed the space between her eyebrows and replied indifferently. If the divine sword can't even distinguish this, then how can it be called a divine sword? I don't want it even if it's given to me for free. Just as she said this, her heart suddenly tightened, as if some invisible sharp aura had directly crashed into her heart and stabbed her. Could this be the divine sword's aura? Did her words cause the divine sword to be dissatisfied? Who cares? She'll go up first. Looking up, she could already faintly see the cornice of the hidden sword villa's pavilion. Looking down, she often saw the people around her falling like dumplings. There were more than 300 people who came to try their luck. But now, less than 100 people had fallen. The white cloud steps looked as soft as a bun, but when one really stepped on it, it was, as the innkeeper said, incomparably hard. Not only was it hard, it was also hot. Ji Xinyu felt as if she was stepping on a pair of fire tongs. Fortunately, she left as soon as she touched it. Before the heat could reach her feet, she had already leaped up again. She could still feel that sharp aura, and it was getting stronger and stronger. It seemed that this divine sword didn't discriminate between men and women. Most of the survivors were men. Of course, there were also many women. These women's martial arts might not be very strong, but their cloud manipulation technique was not bad. In addition, they had men by their side to take care of them. As long as they were fated, they did not fall. The stairs were indeed magical. Ji Xinyu saw with her own eyes that the tips of many people's feet had clearly stepped on the stairs, but it was as if they had stepped into the void. Their bodies swayed, and they directly fell down. Perhaps the divine sword also wanted to measure these people's various kung fu. Some people had clearly climbed up the first few dozen steps, but suddenly missed a step at the back, because there was a barrier around the mountain. If one wanted to go up the mountain, they had to step on these stairs. They couldn't directly fly up, so no one could take advantage of the situation. Ji Xinyu's first few hundred steps were steady, but after a few dozen steps, the steps seemed to be playing a joke on her. When she stepped on them, she suddenly couldn't feel the calling in her heart, and the solid steps under her feet suddenly softened. Her body swayed violently, and just when she thought she was about to fall, she felt the calling again, and the steps returned to normal. Xie Fenglu, who was beside her, walked steadily. When Ji Shenyu swayed, he had to reach out to support her. But before she could touch Ji Shenyu's body, she steadied herself again. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.